Gilbert Community School Board, Nevaeh Community School Board,
Here.
United Community School Board.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, motion approving minutes of the February 27th, 2018 meeting. Is there a motion?
I would so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved and second. Discussion.
Actually, I do. You look down here for conference board comments, and I had asked about the option of going to one assessor. And Mayor Haley, you explained to me that 2 studies had been done on this already, and the studies could be updated and forwarded to the conference board members. I don't remember receiving them. That doesn't mean maybe they didn't get sent out, though.
I did ask that question to Supervisor, and I was told that they were sent out. We will verify that, and if not, we'll make sure that they are sent out then.
It was going to be updated. We didn't update it. We just sent out the old report.
Right, it was
That's it.
it was just to send out the ones that were
It was a
done.
year ago.
It's not to perform additional study. It was basically sent out the one that was done previously. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
that's
thank
all.
you. Yes, thank you. Other comments or questions? All right, entertain, we got a motion in a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Item 3, discussion of city assessor's budget proposals. Mr. Lynch.
Well, first of all, thank you all for being here this evening. I won't belabor the report. Hopefully, everybody got a copy of it and has read it. Would like to call to your attention on page 3, the tables that are located there. And the one at the top says assessed value, and table 2 says taxable value. And what that does is the rows on the left, there are the 5 classes of property that were required to assess by the state. There's also the railroads, utilities, and gas. That's assessed centrally by the Department of Revenue, so we have nothing to do with that, but those numbers do add into our taxable and assessed value. I think the thing to highlight is the second to the bottom row of the first table, where it says 100% assessed value. That went up 4.2% from 17 to 18. And again, the table number 2, the taxable values, that mirrors table number 1 in all the categories except for the numbers. And I think the highlighted column or row on that would be the very bottom row where it says taxable values total, and they went up 5.7%. And it's always better to go up than down on taxable value. The table on the top of page 4 is something that was put together by my predecessor. And what it tries to explain is the movement by the classes based upon these 6 different categories. And you can see most of the value that was increased in residential was from new construction. We've had lots of new apartments, lots of new houses, and those all enter into the residential classification. So unless there are any other questions on anything up to Exhibit A, I would like to have you turn to Exhibit A in the report, and that's the actual budget that we're proposing. And we'll go over some of the major, I'll highlight some of the major line items. And as far as our increase for this year, it's always been our policy and the conference board's policy that we mirror what the city offers their employees. And this year I was told it was a 3% cost of living and a 2% merit. Based on that, all of our salaries have been adjusted up 5%.
So I have a question when it's time. So if it's a 2% merit, are you handing that out across the board, or are you actually tying it to a review?
Yes, every employee is reviewed before July 1st, and their merit increase is based upon goals they would have set and how close they came to reaching those goals, and just how they performed during the year.
Okay, so you've budgeted that each member of the staff, your deputy, we're not back there, and you all will have met your goals. So you've put in the entire dollar amount?
Yes.
When was the last time anyone didn't meet their goals?
Well, not every year does everybody get the same merit increase.
Okay. Mhm. Thank you. And so 3% is what in fact the council has settled on for your employees as your cost of living? We haven't voted on anything yet?
I can't speak to that. I think that they're in the process of working on
Okay,
it.
with your union contracts, you mean, or still?
With both. We haven't voted on it yet.
Bob, you want to speak to
Yeah,
that?
exactly. Yeah, the budget hasn't, the city manager's proposed budget hasn't been given to the city council yet. That'll happen in a week and a half. But yes, it does include that, 3%.
Okay, it seems, we went for a 2%. We're looking at 2%. Obviously, we haven't finalized ours either, but that's what our union contracts are at this year. And so also then we're looking at that for staff. So we wondered just kind of, were you all on for a 3%?
Go ahead, Bob. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, Greg, Bob was it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The two union contracts that are already settled for this next year are at 3%. And we did a compensation study to see what the other three units that are being negotiated right now, what the settlement trend is. And that's taking all that into consideration, CPI and other information led us to the 3% overall scale adjustment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Excuse me.
Thanks, Bob. And I think another item on that page is our insurance, and it's only going up 2.3% this year, which is, I think, phenomenal. And all the years I've been here, that's the lowest percentage increase I've seen. Then so the payroll and related expenses are going up a total of 3.7%. Then as we head down on the expenses that are non-payroll related, I think the biggest item there is the data processing, and hopefully you can see that it is highlighted in blue. And then if you follow it down to the bottom of the page, Don Tank, our accountant, has done a very good job of breaking out the individual components of that total amount. And again, I'd like to publicly thank Don and Brenda for all the work they do, especially Dawn on putting together the budget. It took her 3 or 4 years to tell me she was an accountant, though. It was like, come on. So our total budget this year is $1 million. At the very bottom line is $1,2006,970, which is an overall decrease of 1% from last year's budget.
But Greg, just help me with this. So last year was a revaluation year, right?
Yes.
So isn't it
No.
more, it's comparing apples to apples, we should be comparing valuation years versus non-valuation years?
Well, I don't think the expenses go up that much. And I can answer one question. Last year, we had $20,000 in the budget for a model to be built for this year, but our ratios are such that we didn't need to use that. So also, that will not be carried forward next year because we wouldn't need it. And then the other big item that we didn't have to carry forward was the $34,000 that we had budgeted in previous years. That is table marked for a content manager software system. And we're having 2 vendors come in within the next 3 weeks to show us 2 different softwares, which we'll decide on which one to go with. So I don't think we've really gone down or up that much as far as reval or non-reval, because we still have the same amount of permits, new construction, work that we have to do, process homesteads, exemption applications. The board of review might change a little bit from the hours that they have to put in. But as a staff, we do as much work. We have more hearings on a reval year, but that really doesn't show up in the budget because we're all salaried.
So if actual expenses in fiscal year 18, which was also a non-reevaluate year, correct, were $237,685.
Well, it's 18-19, so it would have been for 1/1 of 19.
That would have been that we're comparing apples to oranges. Boy, that looks really weird. So that's 170,657 if I am looking for 1819. But you said, as we were looking apples to apples, we should go back to fiscal year 18, correct?
No, I didn't say that.
Oh,
Rick did.
okay, I'm
I
sorry.
said that.
Rick
Yeah.
said
So I honestly believe that we're comparing every other year to every other year in terms of a true scope of work that you've got to put forward. And so it makes sense to me when we see a substantial increase from a non-valuation year to a valuation year. But it feels like we're trying to have our cake and eat it too a little bit, Greg, when we say, well, we're going down this year, but we're really not going down compared to our last non-eval year, right? We're really up 8.6% over 2 years ago.
That could be. We
Yeah,
compare last
absolutely.
year's to this year's. And all we ask for is the amount of money we think is necessary
Mhm.
to run our office efficiently and do a good job of reporting values and administering exemptions and abatements.
So in a 2-year period of time is what you're saying is that expenses have gone up 8.6% in doing the
I
same.
think Rick said that. I don't have that information, so
I
I
am- I
wouldn't
have-
be able to
right.
answer that.
But you're saying that the work is basically the same as 2 years ago, or do you feel that you're still doing more work in a non-eval year?
Well, it depends on how you quantify your work. In a reval year, if values go up, we have a lot more board of review and informal
Right.
hearings. So that creates more work, but that work isn't really reflected because we're all salaried. So we still do the same amount of work almost every year. The major categories that you're looking at don't change that much from year to year.
But we're talking about strictly expenses, not salaries. We're looking at the subtotal for that middle block there, total office expenses. So
Okay.
salaries don't weigh into this. We're just looking at total office expenses. So your office expenses from the last time you had a non-eval year went up 8.6%. Now compared to last year, which was an eval year, where you're showing that actually they're down 4.6%.
Correct.
So that's a spread of 12% between the last
know if-
non-eval, or how does that work?
Maybe
Dawn?
Don could explain that better.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so do we want to talk comparison versus last year or comparison versus 17-18 first?
17-18 first, because that's at least our impression that we're comparing like volume and
Right.
like work.
Okay, so I did look because you had requested, so I wanted to be a little prepared. First of all, for 17-18, I know you're not looking at payroll, but IPERS did change between 17-18 and 19-20. So we've got that change. That as far as expenses, some major things to do is we had in the data processing, we've got some new expenses that we did not have in 17-18. So for example, licenses for Eagle Recorder, which connects us to the recorder's information over at county. That's $704. Data Cloud Solutions, that's so our appraisers can go out and do sketches and field work on their tablets to speed up and make us more efficient. That's $5,755 we're adding. And then maintenance for our document management system, I had to estimate based on the highest quote because we are still working on which software we're going to go with. So I estimated high, I'm afraid, at 10,000. I'm hoping it'll be way less. So those are expenses that weren't even part of the 17-18 proposed budget when we did it. Aside from that, we've got stuff like utilities that has to do with our renting at City Hall. So that they inform us what that's going to be. And so that's going up $773 versus the 17-18. And then equipment rental and maintenance went up $1,200 over the two budgets. And that is due to the fact that I actually had, we have 2 servers in the basement down here, and we have maintenance contracts on those. And previously I had them up in data processing, when in reality they should have been with equipment maintenance. So those did move. So there's that jump. We are, with equipment and machinery, that is going up different because I think we had very little equipment purchased, or we were planning to purchase in 17, 18. And this year, we need to make our deputy's office more efficient. She has not had anything done with that since about 1990s, early 2000s. So she's due for an upgrade, I'm afraid. So there's that.
So, but really, when you take out this about 16,000 of the 20,000, then you're down to roughly 4 to 4,500, which as a whole percentage of your budget and even your expenses is a lot
Right.
lower.
Well, and like, for example, like office supplies, it was 4,500 in 17, 18 for the budget. This year it's 6,000. However, I did drop it from the 7,400 from last year, just because I wanted to be prepared. If we send out assessment rolls, part of that cost is coming out of office supplies. So the paper to print it, envelopes, that sort of thing, that comes out of there, especially if we do it out of house. So some of those expenses there. So I didn't want to take it completely down to 17, 18, just because, as always, all businesses, their expenses do go up. And so I needed to cover that should we have to respond to the market for some reason.
The link, if you will, to the Eagle Recorder, is that your annual licensing fee for the software?
Brenda can probably talk Eagle Recorder as far as those licenses, but it has to, each of the, so at least the 3 people, but I think we decided all full-time staff, so we have access to those records in real time without having to go, oh, could you get off so I can, that sort of thing. That is why that's the $704 for 8 full-time
Okay,
licenses.
that's why
It
it's like,
has something to do with a software change. So we were able to go in under a general password, but they had to, something with Java is changing. So we can't get to the military information any longer unless we have these licenses.
okay, so it sounds like there's going to be an annual fee.
Right.
Were the tablets or a multi-year purchase then?
So
correct?
if I could,
Yeah, sure.
so we're going a long way into the weeds on this. And I'm not trying to discourage that. I appreciate a thorough review of the numbers. My question is, are we at a place where we can vote, or should we postpone this, give an opportunity for a thorough review? But we're going to be here for another 4 hours on our meeting, and I don't mean to protract this, but at least this council member, I'd like to see if we can find a way to bring, now we're talking about tablets, I'd like to try to bring some sense of closure. So it's up to you. You think
It's
that
your
there's
budget.
more-
I'm a names taxpayer, but I'm not here as a names taxpayer. I'm here as the Story County Board of Supervisors. And you're right, it does not affect the 1/3 of the residents of Story County, only the 2/3 that live in Ames.
The-
So that's fine, I'm done.
No, the point wasn't to be difficult. I was just trying to tease out the number of additional questions that you have about this material that we've had in advance.
It's just, I think for me, it's more of a representation and understanding what happens. This is now my third, okay, of on the Ames mini assessor, and I did arrive a little late, so I didn't get to ask all the questions, and I apologize. It's just about what's real here on the expenses going up and what is happening. It seems, so I'm fine. If nobody else has any questions, then I'm done with my questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Greg?
Well, and then the only other thing I'd like to point out is the very next page. And what this does is it shows you at the very bottom where it says proposed taxation per $1,000 of taxable value or of valuation, that's really taxable value. It just simply takes the amount of $1,077,254, which we're asking for to be raised by taxes this year, and divide it by the taxable income of $750,058,424, and that equals 0.35. Now, what I did is I looked at that over the last 10 years, and the median for our office is 0.3475. So that's not outside the limits of anything that we've been experiencing in the past. And I might just suggest the purpose of the mini board meeting is to maybe go over a lot of these things so we could answer them there and then not perhaps
May
take
I
up all the time
suggest
here.
that next year for when you set the date for the mini board, recognizing the fact that for the Story County Board of Supervisors, we don't set who our assigned person is until January 2nd. That's just how we assign our committee assignments. So I think it was a few hours before that I was able to let Greg know that I was staying on for another year. So maybe taking a few more days to allow those entities who might do their assignments at the first of the year.
Who sets that date, Greg? Is that
I
something?
do, yeah. And I was
Is it-
just looking at my schedule. We had some court dates in there,
Yeah,
so
no, Is
it
it
takes some
possible
time to get
to,
prepared for court. So
is it possible to take that in consideration?
sure,
Try and
yeah,
set it
no,
maybe a little
we can
later?
do it later. That's no problem.
Okay.
I think that would take care of the problem.
Sure.
about- Rather, I'm 5 minutes late or not, but certainly would take care of the problem about time to study the information.
I appreciate your due diligence on this. That's important. Just want to make sure we have enough time. So-
I gotcha.
Well, and that's the end of my formal presentation. I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
No.
Other questions for Mr. Lynch? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion approving the recommendations of the assessor's report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion to receive proposed budget. Adoption of budget will occur after the hearing is held, and entertain a motion in a second. And then if anyone wants a conference before you vote, I'm acceptable to that too. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Supervisors, you want a conference on this at all or not? You want
No.
school board? You good? Good. Council? All right. Those in favor say aye. Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Entertain a motion to set 6 PM on February 26, 2019 as a date of public hearing on proposed FY 2019-2020 city assessor's budget.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Discussion? Those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign or abstaining? Carried. Item 4, Greg, resolution approving reappointment of Greg Lynch as city assessor. Can you explain, your term is actually, I learned today that your term is actually up on December 31st of 2020, and I
Correct.
didn't understand, now I do. If you explain why.
Sure. Just asking to be reappointed. I have a letter from the Department of Revenue that states, in fact, I'm eligible for reappointment.
Mhm.
I believe when I asked for reappointment the last time, I asked early also. So it's not unheard of. It's perfectly legal. I like being the assessor.
Yeah, so I'll take the first swipe at this one. I just think this is, Greg, I think you do a great job. I think your staff does a great job. I just think this is really early for us to, you serve all the way through 2020. We're just at the beginning of 19. We're going to sit down and have this meeting again a year from now. And I think 11 months ahead is plenty of time to reappoint. I don't think we need to do it 23 months ahead of time. That's just, I will be a no on this one if we go down this road, because I think we've got an opportunity to do it a year from now, and that's still plenty of time to reappoint. That's my feelings.
Others?
So what would the argument be in favor of doing it now? I mean, I'd like to try to understand both sides of this. I think Rick's point seems to hold water. This is not anything
No.
against you. It's
Oh, no, I don't
just
take
a
it
question of
personally anyway.
protocol, making this decision.
Been through enough board of view hearings. I don't
Sure.
take it personally.
Sure.
No, it's just, I just asked to be reappointed early. So,
Okay.
My understanding is that once an assessor passes all his CEUs, which is amazing, 150 hours in 6 years' time and 90 are tested, which is amazing to me. You become automatically eligible to be reappointed.
correct.
And so since he sent a letter saying he's eligible to be reappointed, that option exists if the conference board wants to take a motion on that at this point in time. If they don't, doesn't mean it's a vote of no confidence.
Right.
It's more or less, let's put it on the agenda for
I
next
can
year.
wait another year.
Okay.
I'd rather not, but I can.
All right. what's the conference board's preference?
Well, if we take no action on it, what's the effect?
Just put on agenda for next year.
Yeah, I just assume not take any action.
All right.
I think by next year, we will also possibly have new city council members, right? We've got an election coming up this fall, so it might make sense to wait on it until
All right.
next year.
All right. So hearing no motion on the resolution, we'll just go ahead and move on. All right. Anything else, Greg, or staff? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad someone enjoys crunching numbers like you guys do. Oh my gosh, my eyes just. So, anyway. Conference board comments. Gloria, anything?
I have nothing.
David?
No, sir.
No.
Pass.
Gina?
Nothing.
Sorry, I forgot your name.
Leanne.
Leanne?
No?
Nothing.
Comment?
No.
Nothing.
Okay. All right. Favorite motion of the night?
I move that we adjourn.
All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for January 22nd to order. And before I start, some of you may have seen the press release, but our whole city family is grieving over the loss of the untimely passing of Steve Wilson, the energy guy. And we want to express from the dais our profound condolences to his family and to those who work with him. We know it's a big loss, and we're very saddened by it. So, okay, council, we'll move on to consent agenda. Does council wish to pull any items this evening? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve.
Move consent.
Second.
All right, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Okay, next item is public forum. This is opportunity for those in the audience to address the council on any topics of city business that are not on the agenda. And I would ask that everyone who wishes to speak limit their time to no more than 3 minutes this evening. We have a big agenda. So is there anyone who wants to address council this evening?
Hello, my name is Jay Arbuckle. I reside at 519 Oliver Circle, and I'm here to read a letter on behalf of the Ames Climate Action Team. The Ames Climate Action Team urges you to develop and implement a climate action plan for the city of Ames. The UN International Panel on Climate Change Special Report and the United States Fourth National Climate Assessment, both released in late 2018, state that nations, states, and municipalities must take rapid and major actions to cut greenhouse gas emissions and sequester carbon to avoid or lessen the most catastrophic effects of climate change. We strongly encourage the city of Ames to join the hundreds of progressive, vibrant cities across the U.S. that are implementing their own climate action plans to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, sequester carbon, and increase climate resilience. Cities across the U.S. have found that leadership on climate action, especially reductions in fossil fuel use, can lead to cost savings, operational efficiencies, cleaner air and water, better community health, and long-term prosperity. Progressive, creative, and innovative people want to live in communities that value those characteristics. Climate action planning embodies those characteristics through commitment to proactive, long-term investment in community health and well-being. The City of Ames already has many climate-smart initiatives underway. The EcoSmart Comprehensive Strategy is leading to significant reductions in energy consumption and GHG emissions. The new comprehensive plan will incorporate sustainability considerations as well. However, Ames needs to adopt a formal climate action plan to set GHG reduction, carbon sequestration, and adaptation goals, and also to integrate and coordinate actions and track progress toward those goals. We request that the City of Ames make the development of a community-wide action plan, climate action plan, an urgent priority for 2019. We thank you for your consideration of our request. Thank you.
Thank you. If I might just ask, this is not a public forum to be clapping. We appreciate the fact they're addressing council. Does anybody else like to talk or address the council?
Hello, my name is Kiara Travisette. I live at 1239 Wisconsin Avenue. I am representing CAUSE, Citizens Actualizing and Understanding Sustainable Environments. I would first like to thank the council for their positive response to the Ames High petition. And on behalf of the 613 students who signed it, I want to really encourage Ames to address the changing climate at the upcoming goal-setting meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Very good. Close public forum. Move on to item 21, downtown parking meters. Damien, John?
Yeah, I'll start off on this one. So in the non-agenda packet of City Council on December 11th, there was a memo that provided more information to City Council on 5 parking issues. Question 2 was referred back to staff to have on the agenda, which we'll discuss tonight, and that is the parking meter rates for downtown. The staff report tonight for this item, though, contains all the information that was in that memo with updates to question 1. Question 1 was in regards to the year-to-date revenue and then projecting that out to what the year-end revenue will be for meters. And then, as I had just previously mentioned, question 2 is what was referred tonight, and that's the rates for downtown. So as you see there, there was 2 different scenarios that was presented. From the update from question 1, if rates were to remain the same, we're projecting that the year-end revenue for the current fiscal year will be $338,809. Using the same meter utilization, if we were to go to 50 cents on Main Street, stay at 50 cents in the parking lots, and then stay at 75 cents for the side streets, then we project the revenue to be $284,418. And if we were to change all the downtown meters to 50 cents, then we're projecting the revenue to be $225,495. So again, that's just using the same meter utilization that we've seen so far this fiscal year, not accounting for any potential increase that may or may not come if the rates were to be lowered.
Okay. Any questions for staff on, do you want to go through each question or I think that.
No, you only asked for actually, the council only asked for the issue about reducing the parking rates. The rest is old information.
Apologize. Thank you. Any questions for staff on this one? Okay. Before we go to public comment, to share with those in the audience that we have gotten a lot of emails and data sent to us, and I know the council has taken that seriously and digested that. And I know that one of the things that's important that's been expressed by people in email is reducing the parking meter rate down to 50 cents. Those that are in the audience that are interested in seeing that happen, would you just raise your hand, please? Okay. Anyone opposed to that? Okay. So I'm going to open public comment. If anyone wishes to come and speak, they are. I would just ask that you would not come up and read the same letter that was sent to us, but you certainly can highlight particular points and just not go through the same thing over and over and over again too. So.
No, I won't do that too.
All right. Introduce yourself, please. And you may.
Gary Youngberg from Ames Silversmithing, 220 Main downtown. First of all, thank you for the time that you spent on this and for the time that you've spent with us one-on-one talking about the issues. I wanted to just address a couple of things. The figures that we see up here in question 2 don't look like the figures that were in the letter that I sent to you. And I just want you to consider that when you're making your decision. We anticipated essentially no drop off on meter usage if the rates were at 50 cents an hour, which projected a fair amount more revenue, about $389,000 a year, as opposed to $225,500. I just think that's a significant amount of difference to consider why. And I think if you move it back to 50 cents an hour, you'll see a new feeling downtown that's missing at this time. So again, thank you for your consideration and the time that you've spent on this. It's been a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public comment and council discussion.
I move that we reduce the rates to 50 cents
Okay.
an hour for all the meters in downtown.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Could I ask Mark? There's actually Mark and I talked about this beforehand that this would come up, and it's actually Mark. If you just explain how this needs to be worded, it actually needs to be moving to amend something. Is that right?
That's right. So the municipal code says that you can amend the parking meter map, which is how you would do this by resolution. So it would be a motion to adopt a resolution to amend the city's parking meter map by setting the rates on Main Street at
Not Main Street, the whole, all
oh,
of downtown.
all of downtown. Okay, downtown at 50 cents an hour.
So moved.
Second.
Excuse me, can I?
Well, we got to.
Okay.
Withdraw your motion.
So I'll withdraw the first motion.
Okay.
And I'll move the motion as expressed by the city attorney.
Is that okay?
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. Chief?
If it's okay with everyone here, it'll take a little time to implement it. Do you mind? We have to change everything. It's bad weather. Would everybody be agreeable if we had it no later than April? Could you do that by April 1st?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that all right? I mean, give us some
Getting
time.
the Frozen meters to be a little tough.
So
We have to have an effective date is what I'm saying, and the meters have to be changed out. So it's almost February. Just to be safe, is everybody okay with April 1st effective date?
So Damien, you were just saying that when you again take care of the meters, you got frozen meters potentially because of the weather and.
Yeah, we have to we have to physically get into every meter case to do the change. We did it last time, but it was better weather than it is right now.
So it'd be effective April 1st.
It could be sooner if you had the work done, but this gives direction for an outer timeframe.
At the latest, April 1st, for sure, we can guarantee
No
we'll
later
get it
than.
done before then.
So I would amend my motion accordingly.
Or you?
Second.
All right. All right, move second. Discussion?
Can you explain that just a little more? So is there a flag day when everything gets changed because of the preparatory work you've done on the meters?
Well, we would work with Susan to do a press release when we're ready, when we know that the weather is ready to do it. And it usually takes around a week. So once we can verify that we can get into the meters without either damaging or doing something negative to them, we would give notice that in a week's time, the rates would be updated.
And then during that week, as you visited each meter, its rate would change at that moment.
Right.
Yep.
For instance, Park Mobile would change with literally a click of the button. So, but there would be a transition similar to what there was when we increased the rates.
Thank you.
So I'm probably going to be the only one that doesn't support the motion. And it's not because I'm not sympathetic to kind of the drastic change that was made for the meters, but I think just a couple of things to point out. First, when we made the decision to change the meters, we made what I believe was a very fiscally responsible decision over multiple public meetings and after receiving quite a bit of information from staff. And so there's one thing that's sort of frustrated me about this process is that there's been an implication that we did this kind of behind the scenes or that we did it very quickly, and that just wasn't the case. And so we started a trend, I think, at council over the last year or so where we've continued to revisit decisions that we've made. And I think if we continue down that path, we're not only undermining the work that we're doing, but the work that we're asking staff to do on our behalf. And we should be more willing to stand by our decisions, or at the very least, let them stand for longer than 6 months. We have a parking study coming, and I may be open to changes at that point, but I just don't think it's responsible for us to throw out something that we did in good conscience.
I think that's a very solid comment, Amber, and I feel the weight of that. We made an effort to communicate like we do everything through our normal channels of communication. The Ames Tribune covered this story. KSI covered this story. Various council members have vehicles for communicating through newsletters. I posted this on Ames People Facebook. And I want to point out that our city publication that goes in the utility, that went out in May, June, and July of 2018. So I feel the weight of Amber's comments, I think, is very solid, and it is a very begrudging vote for the very reasons that Amber has so thoughtfully articulated.
And I guess I'll throw out there too, I think one of the things that we need to keep in the back of our mind as we go through this, we do have the study coming, like Amber said. So we're going to make more changes to the system. I think there are changes to the system that we can do that will help things anyway. And so this is different than a lab experiment where we're changing multiple variables at different times and we're not measuring outcomes. So we've kind of got some random things happening as we're working our way through this, and that's messy. But as we do work through the rate setting, I did a back of the envelope calculation from the last time we raised this. And if you just inflate the cost at the rate of inflation, we're at 50 cents an hour. So there's some justification for that number, but that number doesn't incorporate any capital needs. So that's a new expense to the system that we're charging to the system that we haven't in the past. So we do need to take that into account as we work our way through this. And I know it's a much bigger, more complicated financial picture than that, but if you boil it down to doing it on a napkin, that's what it looks like. So I'm reluctant to support it. I think we'll get there. We've got to figure out this whole system. We have other big changes coming to downtown. This is just messy.
I have one more thing to say about Amber's point. It's not like I'm talking myself out of my vote, but I'm not. Amber brings up the point of fiscal responsibility. It is easy for us to make a vote on the downtown parking and do it in somehow as if it was in isolation of the very real obligations we have to maintain the city infrastructure. It is not. And Amber very appropriately reminds us that we are stewarding city resources and we have an obligation to make sure those things are paid. I will be very resistant to asking the taxpayers of Ames out of their property taxes to pay for this parking meter, the infrastructure. I don't think that's an appropriate use of property taxes. So we're going to have a conversation at some point about how these important assets of the city are going to be maintained. So I appreciate, Amber, how well you made these comments tonight.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Yelston.
Nay.
Dickinson.
Aye.
O'Leary.
Nay.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Item 21B, downtown employee hang tag system.
So from the earlier meeting, council had directed staff to create a hang tag system for the downtown employees. So Damien has worked with the police, with administration, with some of the downtown folks, and created the tag that you see here above. So that rate would be $10 a month. I believe we have approximately 184 stalls that are in this category available to park. But with current utilization, we're not sure what the appropriate tag number will be. So we're going to start out with 100 tags and take inventory as we go along and see how things go, and then potentially increase that number as we go along. So how this tag system will work is you see 4 squares up there representing the months of the year. If someone wants to pay through the end of the year, there'll be one punch for December, and they'll pay that appropriate amount. That means that the tag is good until the month that is punched. So if they only want to pay for 3 months, now that'd be February, March, and April would then be punched. So in that scenario, the tag would be good through April. If they wanted to then renew that for another 3 months, they would come in and get another new tag.
And these will be good on what side? Where? What spaces?
So these spaces will be on the south side of the median.
And the majority of Lot X, which is the far western part of the CBD lot that doesn't have a median, but it is mainly for our
The
stalls.
Wells Fargo area.
Right.
Okay.
So I just have a question. Help me remember this. I'm trying to think, what are the negative impacts of instituting the system? We already sort of set it in motion, but we're about to approve the final system here. And the things that come to my mind are possibly that more people who have hang tags will be in the spots for longer. So that might just affect the number of spots available there. But otherwise, we're not removing any aspect of the parking system. Isn't that right?
Right. The only thing that I think we identified when we was first proposing this as like a risk would be the amount of maybe people that are using reserve stalls that would transition to a hang tag. which would be, instead of the $50 a month, it would be the $10 a month. So there's some cost difference there. And then if this becomes popular, which is why council directed us to come up with a limiting number to start with this, because it is not like Iowa State, which is all employee space. It is shared with the public. We didn't want to overwhelm the CBD lot with permitted parking and then essentially not have any free parking for the public. So I think the program, as you see it tonight, tries to minimize those risks, and that's something, just like all of these items we've been talking about tonight, we'll have to monitor moving forward and report back if we see something not working the way it was intended.
Can you remind me on the handicap spaces in the CBD lot, what is the time limit on those spaces?
They are, I believe they're the same as the rest of them. I believe they're all 4-hour parking.
They're all 4-hour. So are those going to be available for hang tags for those individuals who are needing the handicap spaces and also the extended parking time?
They would be. And then if we find that there is a need for an increased number of accessible stalls, we just like I think I've mentioned this in the past, somebody would want that, they'd make a request and we would create more accessible stalls. So I don't think there's any risk in essentially employees taking up those spaces and then we not have them. That's always been kind of a moving target based upon need.
Amy, what kind of feedback have we had? This has been out for a little bit. Have you had any kind of feedback from downtown employers or employees about the pros and cons of this?
Well, there's some, it's been very minor, and it's been through Eric Abrams, the interim president. I think he's transitioned that to somebody else. But just the same things council have heard. Some are really excited to have it. I think the example given, like there's some hairdressers that would really want it. Some businesses that have part-time are in between. So I think the feedback that we've gotten of the people who have to move their cars all the time seem to be interested in this. So until we start until we start actually doing contracts, it's hard for me to say sitting here what the response will be. But okay, thanks.
And how long can they purchase this for? And does this program have a finite ending?
Well, because of, as we mentioned, there's the parking study is pending. You can see that this program goes through the calendar year. And if we find that it's successful and the parking study supports its continued use, I would think that we would make it more permanent. But really what we're looking at is a 2019 effort.
I can't recall the way we structured this. Would it need our approval again to do another program year, or is that something that you would be able to just do?
Well, for what we would want it. We would want your endorsement of it to move on. But tonight, the item that we're asking is the approval of the contract. And that contract, you can change the year on at any point. So it would be, the way I see it is there would be recommendations in the parking study. And if this is part of it, it would, that's where you would see any kind of future extension.
And how will you publicize this? Susan will send out a press release or some kind of where to get it?
That, and like I said, working with Eric and other contacts we have with downtown to distribute to the people that we know want it. But then, yes, we'll do press release, website, any outlet that we can use.
Remember, this program is geared to help the problem that was identified for employees in downtown. So we're going to work with a lot of the employers downtown. They have to verify that those people who are going to sell the hang tag to are actually employed in the downtown area. That's who we want to give preference to. That's the problem that was brought before you to solve.
Yeah, I believe we're going to allow redacted pay stubs or letters from the business owner.
That's correct. Yeah.
So one of the things that I see noted in the contract is that the downtown employee parking tag program will end December 31st, 2019 or sooner if the Ames City Council chooses to end the program early. So have we accounted for how we refund people if they have purchased through December?
Yeah, I talked with customer service. It would be just a refund to everybody who has a contract. So their contact information is on it. There may be details and logistics and how that's exactly done. But yeah, if we end it prematurely and like, for instance, for example, they pay through December, we would have to prorate and refund what they haven't used yet.
Good question.
Any other questions for staff? All right, hearing none, and open up public comment on this topic.
Gary Youngberg, Ames Silversmithing, 220 Main. I'm just curious if you had heard, Damien, at all, how many people anticipate buying hang tags and how many monthly rental stalls might be lost? Has there been a dollars and cents equality there? So, monthly stalls are $50, I think. So you'd need to sell 5 hang tags to make up for one lost stall. Had that been discussed at all? And have you gotten much feedback on how many people will be not having their monthly stall?
We don't have a committed number to the number of people that are only anecdotal evidence that somebody has a reserve stall that would want to change to this system. So not a hard number.
Okay. And then I know via Eric, have you heard how many might be anticipating buying a hang tag?
He was going to poll the businesses that he knew when we met back in December, and I hadn't heard from him what that number is. So I don't have a firm number of who's interested to start with.
Okay. I followed that a little bit on his Facebook post, and I know some people had replied positively, but personally, and I'm ambivalent about the hang tag system. Quite frankly, I guess I'm leaning away from it. But I don't think there's enough information yet to make that commitment. I think it's important to note that the Downtown Ames Association made a proposal via Cindy Hicks to go to 10-hour parking back there to cover their the employees and so on. And perhaps if we had done that or do that, we wouldn't lose any $50 rental stalls and wouldn't have to go through a hang tag system. I think there's a lot of questions yet to be answered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Council?
Move alternative 1.
Second.
And would you just, so people at home that may not be aware what that is, just clarify what that is?
Oh, I closed that screen already.
Approve the monthly rental contract?
Yeah. Oh, wait, here it is. Exactly. I move that we approve the monthly rental contract for the downtown employee hang tag program.
Okay, then moved in second. Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, item 22, follow-up report regarding parking enforcement in areas adjacent to Iowa State University campus. Chief?
Good evening. Staying with the theme of parking questions and updates. This first topic that I'm bringing you is an update on our efforts to enhance the parking enforcement in the area adjacent to Iowa State University campus. Back in the summer of 2017, council directed us to increase our enforcement in that area. We did so. I really want to extend my appreciation to our past and our current student government representatives. They were really strong partners with us in communicating about a topic that was potentially not going to be very well received by students. And so we really relied on student government to help us with those discussions, to help respond to identify and respond to student concerns. And I really appreciate the extent to which student government stepped up and helped us with this issue. It went reasonably well with students, and I think we were able to respond to their concerns in part because of the assistance we got from our liaisons here. So thank you. We got through the fall. We staffed up in 2017, increased our enforcement out there, got through the year, resolved those concerns, started up again this fall, did a lot of outreach and education, again, with the assistance of student government. And I think we have a pretty good feel for how it's working out there. Our assessment is that the situation has improved. We've heard that from the neighborhoods. As with anything else in parking, there are folks who wish it was perhaps better, and there are folks who feel like we should back up. But I think there is some common ground in that it seems better out there for the neighborhood. In terms of staffing this, we think we can maintain the current level of compliance in that area and maintain our presence in that area with 13 CSOs. We originally projected 15 and we built our staff up to 15. We can staff our overtime shifts in that area and I think have sufficient capability to respond to those surges that we get in the fall with a staffing level of 13 CSOs. You might recall we had a base rate of 10 CSOs that we were working from when we implemented that program. So that's really a summary, an update of what's happened over the past year and a half in that program, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Chief?
Chuck, based on your experience with other sorts of policing efforts in student areas where you have a lot of turnover pretty regularly, is it obvious that we need continued education about these sorts of things, or we see a reversion to previous activity levels?
I think we'd see a reversion of previous activity levels. How long it would take is hard for me to guess, but yes, we'd return to that past behavior.
Any other questions for Chief Sykosh? All right. Open up public comment on this topic. Is there anyone who wishes to address council on this? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Council, there are 3 options in the staff report.
Move alternative 2, continue enhanced parking enforcement in the areas adjacent to the Iowa State University campus by adding $63,216 in parking enforcement expense to the FY 2019-2020 budget year to maintain 3 additional CSOs for a total of 13.
Second.
All right, move to second.
So this is the second year we've done this. We've added money to the budget or recommended adding money to the budget. Is this something that I guess we have to make a decision on at some point, whether it's permanent or do we come back and revisit this annually?
Well, I think
maybe we see its effectiveness. I mean, it's only been 1 year, so maybe we see its effectiveness over a few.
I think you're doing
and
it
that
for the
way-
fiscal year is what you're doing for next fiscal year and making a decision. So it's 1 year at a time. I would think every year you're going to revisit something. I mean, the demand might be in another place. I don't know. I think we're just asking for this year.
And I'm okay with that. I'm just trying to figure out what the long-term strategy with this is specifically.
Yeah. Well, I personally think you should vote for this. Don't get me wrong, but there is a lesson to be learned here in this whole parking fund situation. You have to learn that you cannot balance a budget on a parking fund based on violations. In fact, when you put the expenditures in, you hope that the police will alter behavior. Therefore, violations will go down. Therefore, revenues will go down. So the more you do here, the more we're going to eat into a balance. You're going to have to generate revenue someplace else. And that may be in fees in other places, just so you know that. So this one area is, we're recommending to the $24,000, but that's a deficit. If you add more areas, it gets even more. So you're adding expenditures, you're actually going to reduce your revenue. And you'll see that in the game day revenue. We talked about that. Chuck will give you the estimate on if you increase that game day substantially, we hope and trust that his officers will change behavior after the first couple of games. We probably won't see double the revenue or whatever the increase in the fee is. So there's a message there. And then you compound that later on, and I think you should do this too, don't get me wrong. You want to waive parking enforcement in downtown for great events that attract people downtown. You're then eliminating or reducing revenue. It's all going to come back to some way, and we'll deal with this in this study, on how we're going to generate revenue other than through violations and maybe if we're going to continue to waive revenues of ours, how we're going to finance the parking fund. So I'm not saying that in any way that you should vote against any of the next three items. I just want you to understand what you're doing. In the long term, that's not going to be sustainable. And that's why the study will probably help us how we're going to develop a sustainable parking fund.
And I guess maybe that's where I was trying to get to with this is I'm not sure how we make a value decision here. Is what we're doing worth $24,000 in deficit to the parking reserve? And I'm not saying that it isn't. I just don't know how to answer that question.
Well, it certainly
No,
is for neighbors.
I have a question. So, I mean, I was just going to think about that too. It talks about total tickets issued in this geographic area, and that being 56% of all citations written in the city during that time period. So that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. And it kind of, I see campus town. But also, yeah, I suppose there's an estimate then for the dollar value of that geographic area and the staff, those 3 additional staff. I mean, they're almost paying for themselves, aren't they? If you're getting 56% of the.
I wouldn't look at it that way.
So when we make an initial change like this, the citation count goes up as we're trying to gain compliance.
Right.
And as people begin to understand that we have a regular, predictable enforcement pattern, they find parking alternatives. We have to continue to monitor the area. So we're doing, we're marking tires to monitor compliance with
Return
those time
drops over
regulations.
time,
But
yeah.
those citations, really, as neighborhood satisfaction goes up, those citations are going down.
Yeah.
And yet we need to have some monitoring presence in there to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. It just seems like that 56% of all citations written in that area. Or yeah, that was an interesting figure to see.
Did that include football?
3 home football.
Yeah.
It includes the football games too.
Yeah.
And those-
Yeah.
It's not at all surprising for those of us who live there. I can't say that when I saw that
On
number,
college campus.
it shocked me.
Yeah. I said that.
I do think one of the things that other college towns do that we have not considered and that we could roll into discussions in the future, but not tonight, is a permitting system for near campus neighborhoods. A lot of college towns do that, and it acknowledges the parking as a commodity in those neighborhoods. And it might be a way to also help those neighborhoods that are such a high percentage of our enforcement budget to help contribute to offsetting the other parts of the system, just as we're counting on meters in campus town and downtown to help contribute to that whole system. This is part of that system too. And so I don't think it's out of line for us in the future to consider whether this part of the system should be also contributing to the parking fund in more sustainable ways. And I don't mean gouging ways, but ways that that other communities have considered and implemented and used pretty effectively so that they can maintain a sustainable system.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right, item 23, game day parking ordinance. Chief?
So last summer, you asked us to research potential strategies for the game day parking problem. And the challenge there that's developed over the years is that legal parking spaces are now as expensive or potentially more expensive than the price of our citation. And we began to hear from some of the folks who are parking out there that they were well aware of that and taking advantage of the price difference and the proximity of those neighborhoods to the stadium. And so we looked around the country and identified a game day ordinance approach that had been undertaken at Berkeley and looked at what they had implemented. And well, we're not Berkeley. The problem was analogous to what we face. People were willing to take advantage of parking available near their stadium, even if the citation price was relatively high. They responded to that by increasing the cost of a citation and trying to encourage people back into those legal public parking areas. And so that's what we have brought you as a point of discussion for this evening, is a model where the city would designate a game day violation, and it would apply in specified areas adjacent to the stadium. And again, this was the geography we had discussed over the summer when we had a preliminary conversation with you about this. We identified these areas, and what we're suggesting at this point is that you consider a $35 or actually a $40 violation. So double the price of our traditional ticket, apply it to any type of violation other than a meter violation or a handicap parking in this area. So blocking a driveway, alternate side, et cetera, et cetera. Any form of illegal parking in this area on a game day would have a $40 violation associated with it. And as we do with our regular ticket, to encourage people to remember to pay this and get it taken care of, we reduce that charge by $5 if it's paid in a timely manner. This follows the approach that Berkeley took. I need to tell you, their solution wasn't completely successful in that arena, and so they've returned to that ordinance and they're re-examining the pricing on it. And I really don't know how our folks will respond out there, but I think it's a reasonable approach to respond to the congestion that we have in the neighborhoods out there.
Chuck, did we have any interaction with ISU Athletic Department or Alumni Association about this?
We have, over the years, discussed this parking problem with them, and they want to be good neighbors. And so they're supportive of working with us to communicate to football patrons that they should park legally, that there's legal game day parking available in lots and on campus. And I'm confident we'll have good cooperation from the university if you choose to go ahead with this. One of the reasons we're bringing it to you early is they begin planning for their football communications early this spring. And if this is going to be a part of what their customers should expect when they come to the city, we want to work with them to start communicating early on this topic.
Appreciate that.
I would just add to that Steve and I have had a meeting with Dr. Winterstein, and also we happen to have one with Jamie Pollard, and that was brought to their attention. They're both understanding of the situation. We explained the emergency vehicle passing through, the inconvenience for the residents, the potential one-way traffic, all the issues. And I think that Jamie was even actually, we had asked if they would send out some kind of a notice saying, hey, the fines are going up. And actually, could you explain, did you put some warnings on people's windshields this year as well too? Explain that too.
Yes, with every citation we wrote this year, we put a small notice in there about where the legal parking was, and also notified people that it was likely that the city would raise the cost of a violation in that area for the coming year. You know, it's a little piece of paper, so I don't know if everyone pulled that out and read it closely, but we understand that communication will be an important part of this. In your staff report, you see some costs associated with signage in that area. We think we'll have to put an additional notice on each of our parking signs, and then we've also proposed some, and Brian's got an example of current draft of what that might look like. And then also we think we'd need to do some special signage during that transition period, try to catch the the routes into those neighborhoods and alert people that there is a special game day enforcement penalty in those areas. So it'll be a challenge to us to educate all those visitors coming to those games. And yet, I think that's what the neighborhoods are asking us to do.
Chuck, for many years, I know in the Scan neighborhood, neighbors were able to pick up no parking signs that they could post themselves in front of their frontage when it was illegal. It might be worth working with the neighborhood associations, because we've got Oak to Riverside, which is a pretty strong and well-organized neighborhood association, and Scan, to get the neighbors themselves to post signs to help spread that
You bet.
message.
And we'd love to do that. I think we still have some people who collect those, but not very many. So if this is something council wants to proceed with, we certainly would look for some partners in getting that done, and any help we can get from the neighborhoods would be great. And I think you're right, there are some areas where we could probably get some assistance in posting that.
So in looking at the map that's in the packet, north of Lincoln Way, the Riverside, Russell area isn't included in the map. And I guess I'll ask the question just because on the consent agenda, we took away parking on one side of North Riverside earlier today. That seems like it might be an area impacted by that. Was there any sort of, how was that looked at?
Well, what we did with this map is capture the council discussion from this summer and bring it back to you really without any additional modification. We certainly are open to the council's wishes on this, and we've spent some time sort of speculating on whether this will dislocate some of that, some of those game day violations further out into neighborhoods like Oak to Riverside, north of Lincoln Way. It's speculation, but I certainly either tonight or at some future point, I wouldn't be surprised if you hear an interest from neighborhoods in being included in this ordinance.
And tonight, I'm okay with deferring to what we have in front of us. I was just curious to how that might play out.
Very good question.
I thought of that too. And
Yep.
this is one of the ordinances, isn't it, where we can easily amend the map in the future, right?
Yeah, it really was designed, we tried to come up with a way where the ordinance is pretty discreet and you can modify it if there are problems in a particular neighborhood, and it is very possible that we'll displace some of this parking into places that we don't anticipate or places that aren't currently a problem. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if we're back in front of you amending the areas of concern.
Is this also the map of where the warnings were placed during enforcement this year? Or was it sort of approximate this, or?
This is very similar. I'm not sure, off the top of my head, I can't tell you if we went all the way out to the boundaries of these areas with those warnings. But certainly in the country club neighborhood, all of those vehicles that were ticketed had that warning attached to them. And then in the bulk of that Oak to Riverside neighborhood, those warnings were also included with the citations.
Do you plan to continue with the warnings let's just assume we adopt this map as is right now. Would you continue issuing warnings in the neighborhoods adjacent to what the map is now? So like north of Lincoln Way and Oak Riverside, or do you have a plan on that?
Well, the warning that we issued, or the communication that was included with the citation, the primary purpose of that was to direct people to where the legal parking was.
Yeah.
And so we distribute a lot of those on game day. Any place close to the stadium gets one of those and has for several years. We certainly, if we knew council was going to add a neighborhood, we could include the warning that said, we anticipate this fine will go to $40 in the future. I don't know that I would I don't know that I would assume that's what you're going to do and put it on the warning without some council vision or directive on that. But our goal out there is to encourage people to use the legal paid parking lots and park legally in those spaces. And so with those tickets, there is a little note that says, here's where you can park for free and here's the rate. And we absolutely will continue to do that.
And one final question. I think I know the answer to this one, but it's a lot like what Chris asked. I think this is exactly the map that we saw in July. And I noticed that the neighborhood on Little Blue Stem, the southwest corner of the map here, is not included. Do we have any recollection as to how that line was drawn, or do we not know?
I don't know that I can give you a parking count in there, or most of this was based on our feedback from the parking enforcement staff who were out there. We asked them to identify the areas where we have known consistent problems with game day violations. And so it may very well be that we push people across the street and have to begin to add areas. Okay. Or you may choose to add those areas tonight too, of course. But I do suspect it'll be a dynamic process as we work through this.
It may be enough if we encourage those areas that are near what's mapped to put up no parking signs.
Yeah.
Not the $40 game day zone, but just no parking signs. Because if people are aware that there are going to be these areas that are getting ticketed, they may read a no parking sign as I might get a $40 fine, even if it's not the case. So they may do what they're supposed to do anyway.
Yeah. So, and we may shift the group back into legal parking. And of course, that's our goal.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of break this informal pattern of just parking illegally and we're following the next person in. So I'd like to think that we might be able to turn it around and get the crowd moving back into the legal parking lots.
Well, and ultimately, I mean, for most of us who live in the older parts of the neighborhood, the important thing is that those emergency vehicles be able to get through the narrow streets, which they are not easily able to do when we have parking on both sides. So I think anything that helps us do that is an improvement.
Okay, let's see if there's an open public comment on this particular topic this evening. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address council on this item on the agenda? Seeing none, close public comment. Any further questions?
The only hesitation I have, and Steve, this is your comment, the signage can sometimes be confusing. So now we're going to add more signs. So that's my only hesitation. I don't have any suggestions on that. It's just the reality. You have to sort of pay attention when you're in there parking and you've got multiple signs to sort of navigate what you're supposed to do. It can be a little bit cumbersome. I'll move alternative 1, approve the first reading of the game day parking ordinance.
Second.
All right, move to second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. What item 2B, 23B?
We'll have to replace the signs for $23,000. I think it's difficult right now to take more money out of the parking fund. Road use tax is appropriate here. We can't do this for parking lot redevelopment, but since the signs are on the street information, there can be justified to come out of road use tax. So it'll be road use tax available balance. If you'd like us,
You need a motion on that?
yes, I'd like to document your support for that.
I would move that we take the $23,000 for the game day parking signage from the road use tax fund.
Second. Okay, discussion? All right, roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, item 24, 2019 to 2024 capital improvement plan. I will open up Actually, council went through and reviewed this last week, and now is the opportunity for anyone in the audience that wants to address city council on any of the items contained in the CIP. Is anyone in the audience wants to address council on this? I will draw to council's attention. I trust you saw there was one letter that came in late this afternoon from Justin Dodge. That's
Actually,
just
as I read that, that's not appropriate for a capital improvement.
Okay.
They're asking for outside funding. It to be for that. You know what I mean? Capital improvements plans for city infrastructure.
Okay.
I believe he's asking for, you'll have to deal with
it's
the
more of a
budget.
budget. It's a budget.
It's a budget item for an outside
Outside funding.
agency. I think you appropriated 20 out of a $40,000 project. Now he's asking for $100,000 for a $200,000 project, but I'm not sure if he wants the other 20, make it 120 or a total of 100.
Okay. All right. I'll close public comment. That's all we need on that, right?
Yep.
All right. Item 25, staff report on Quarry Estates off-site improvements. John?
So the development areas on North Hyde up to 190th, when they were annexed in the annexation agreements, included provisions for 2 off-site improvements. One was at Bloomington and Hyde. The other one was at Bloomington and Grand Avenue. So the way the agreements were set up, that when the areas, when the annexation agreements were approved for these areas, that money was placed into escrow for their proportional share for those 2 improvements. So the Bloomington and Hyde improvements will likely be a near-term improvement. We'll have our long-range plan update coming up this year, and it's likely that that'll be a high priority. The Bloomington and Grand will probably be a longer-term improvement. So Mr. Friedrich with Quarry Estates has requested that the money that he paid into escrow for Bloomington and Hyde remain in escrow, but that the cash that Quarry Estates paid for Bloomington and Grand be returned in exchange for a letter of credit. So when subdivision agreements are drafted and approved by council, there's typically 2 different methods for financial security. One would be the escrow method that all of these developments had. Another very common method is to secure the improvements with a letter of credit. So what he's requesting is a typical method of financial security. This being a longer term project, staff has no issue if council chooses to go that route. So what would need to be done is that the Quarry Estates development agreement, or excuse me, the annexation agreement, would need to have a text amendment allowing letter of credit to be an acceptable financial security mechanism. We then would return the cash that Quarry Estates deposited for that Bloomington and Grand improvement. We would determine what the current value is and what the Quarry Estates proportional share is. And then Mr. Friedrich would submit a letter of credit. And we would then write Quarry Estates Friedrich the check for that original money.
So we have no problem with this. Mr. Friedrich needs to know, though, when you do the way we've handled this situation, once he deposits the money, no matter what the cost is when we build it, could go up to 120, 130,000. The city's taking the risk now. We will make up the difference because we had the money and we invested. Under the way the contract is going to be written, it's not just that he gives us a letter of credit, but when the project needs to be constructed, he'll then have his proportionate share, maybe $130,000. So it could be much more costly, but it's up to the individual developer in this case, what's more important to them, having the money up front and again, keeping their cash or trying to minimize their exposure sometime in the future for a project. So we just want to make sure all parties understand that when we do the agreement.
Yeah, that's a good point. That the way it stands now, Quarry Estates for the Bloomington and Grand, their obligation has been met with the money, the cash in escrow. Their obligation is met. But as Steve pointed out, as that project extends out through the next several years, that while we have the letter of credit in place, Friedrichs will be responsible for that proportional share when we do have that project.
So
Will agrees.
So it's not absolutely clear to me, but I assume that if we were to allow the swap of the escrow for the LOC, that we would not release the funds in escrow until we had the LOC.
That's correct.
If council is interested in option 2 and granting, which would grant Mr. Friedrich's request, the motion should include directing city attorney to proceed with necessary paperwork, because there is some changes and modifications necessary to the agreement to proceed with option 2, if that's what your desire is. If not, then an option 1, then you would deny it and just move, and then we'd move on essentially. So any further questions for John? All right, is there any kind of a motion on this?
We'll move option 2 with the
Directing
changes
city
to the
attorney.
paperwork from the city attorney.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All right, moved to second. Any discussion? Those in, roll call? Nope. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 26, presentation of consultant study on waste diversion option for Story County.
No, you did a good job.
Go ahead. Yeah. Kind of to get this.
Hello, Council. In January, when we reported on the mid-year report for the sustainability contract, we had talked about the recommendation report that we were waiting from the consultants. And we're excited to be able to bring you highlights from that report, as well as talking about the action items that we are pursuing and planning to pursue.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
Okay, and just to remind council, because this has been a process that's been going on for a couple of years now, a little bit of background related to the project. Yeah.
Is that taken today?
Sorry.
Picture?
Yes, early this morning. So this project was really something that we collectively wanted to pursue for two primary facets. One was really looking at ensuring that we would accomplish the most efficient operation of our resource recovery system for the Ames community. And in doing that, we certainly didn't want to jeopardize ensuring that we were diverting the maximum amount of materials from being landfilled. And being able to accomplish those two items, we also had 5 different benefits that we knew would come out of this particular project as well. Certainly looking at reducing the amount of rejected materials. Also, we would have an impact on our community carbon footprint, ensuring that high quality refuse dry fuel was going over to our power plant and assisting our community in producing electricity, really looking at beneficial use for non-beneficial waste. So we certainly wanted to divert it from the landfill, but we wanted to make sure that we were really identifying those outlets and those opportunities in our community to ensure that we were really meeting the needs of all of our community partners. And so our project components really had a 5 faceted approach. We wanted to, first of all, look at completing a community waste audit, determining exactly what was coming into the Resource Recovery Center, and then being able to identify them as beneficial and non-beneficial waste. looking at doing both a residential and business survey to consider current activities that our community members are doing with particular items that they are putting into their waste stream or that they consider waste. And then also looking at the value and the interest they had in other opportunities for those waste materials. We also then wanted to look specifically at our non-beneficial waste stream and looking at opportunities and outlets, ensuring that we could provide a beneficial diversion option, even though they were non-beneficial to the power plant. We also really wanted to look at other waste to energy or refuse-derived fuel systems around the country that had similar characteristics to the city of Ames, because we know that any refuse-derived fuel system is going to have the same challenges as we do, and we wanted to see what sort of things that they were doing in facing those challenges. And then finally, we wanted to bring on a consultant that could bring all of these components together and really offer us with a nice, complete enhancement and recommendation report. And so we wanted to go through each of those components that we mentioned just briefly. First of all, in regard to completing a waste audit of community waste coming into the Resource Recovery Center. 2 summers ago, I believe it was, on a warm summer day, we had a very motivated and enthusiastic group of individuals join us to go through garbage that came into the resource recovery system and to get down into the very nitty-gritty pieces related to that. We basically looked at 4 different waste streams. We had a waste stream that was primarily residential coming in from haulers, one that was primarily commercial coming in from haulers. We also looked on the line of items that were coming through individually from residents coming in to bring things to the Resource Recovery Center. And then we also took a comprehensive sample of what was already on the sorting room floor of the Resource Recovery Center. And from that sort, we identified 13 sources of non-beneficial waste coming into the Resource Recovery Center, as are listed here. In looking at surveys, we completed both a business survey and a residential survey. The business survey was done by the consultant group, SCS Engineers, that completed the final report for us. They initially sent out emails to 139 businesses. Of those, we had over a 60% response rate. I would note that they attempted to get additional businesses to respond, as you would have noted in the full report that was provided to all of you. So there was a total of 875 businesses that were contacted. Collectively, that took us down to more around a 10% response rate. However, we did have 85 businesses provide us with usable survey information. And of those that responded, 99% noted that they were interested and did consider recycling and diversion as a very important part of what they wanted to do as a business in the city of Ames. 50% actually noted that they would be willing to pay more for having additional diversion opportunities. I would note that of that 50%, 45% was within the 1 to 5% increased cost range. Over 5%, we actually had 21% of those that surveyed saying they would actually go up to even 20%, so between 5 and 20% of increased cost. Some specific items that businesses mentioned in the survey related to increasing diversion options included having the option for a recycling redemption center, similarly that the community has had in the past. Also, some sort of city-supported recycling program, as well as having options specifically for food waste and organic material. From the standpoint of residential interest in the residential survey that we completed was a part of a 2016 community survey. So within that survey, we had 13 questions specifically related to waste diversion. There were 2,600 residents that were surveyed. We had a 19% response rate. Within those that were respondents, 74% noted additional interest in recycling options being offered, and 58% were willing to pay more. The average fee that they were willing to pay was right around $13. There was a range, of course, there. 60%, however, I would note, were not interested in paying more fees, but they were interested in more services. Of those survey respondents for residents, 15% noted that they do currently do backyard composting. 58% said they would be interested in utilizing a composting program. 24 of those supported a drop-off site and 34% supporting a pickup service. And related to bulky drop-off, there were 75% of residents that had responded to the survey noting they would be interested in additional opportunities for that, and they would be willing to pay a minimal fee. There was a range of respondents between $2 and $100. The average amount was $18.66.
Do we know how many of those respondents were students?
Yeah, I don't have that breakout, but we could find that out.
But you did look at.
We can we can pull out the demographics.
As we looked at comparing other waste to energy facilities and communities, one challenge that the consultants had was really finding 5 comparative communities based upon population base, demographics, and also the type of facility. It should be noted that mass burn facilities are much more common around the country than the RDF system like we have. And so in trying to really get at sort of those population numbers, we actually included 4 mass burn facilities and 1 RDF facility. Just for clarification purposes, a mass burn facility has less pre-sorting on the front end, so many more materials actually go into the feedstock and what's burned. So it's certainly a little different process than we have. We do considerably more pre-sorting in order to ensure that clean stream going to the to our power plant.
Mary, could you speak
Yes.
to the environmental differences between the mass burn and the RDF? Is there a way of explaining that concisely?
Well, I don't know, Bill, if you have anything you want to add related to that. I know that both facilities have similar air permitting considerations that they have to consider and they have to monitor. For all of the facilities, even though they were mass burn and they didn't have as much pre-sorting on the front end, they still did have sorting for a lot of the same materials that we are sorting out of our system. Bulky items, wood, glass, those sorts of things are still coming in. So I don't know percentage of materials that they were necessarily diverting, that comparison.
Not necessarily a percentage of material, but you're right. Both of them are permitted by the EPA. The RDF is usually run through, we're unique that we're doing cogeneration. Most of the RDF facilities are burning it in a boiler and just burning the RDF only. So they would still fall under the same EPA guidelines that a mass burn facility would. They're called a solid waste combustor. That's a different set of rules than what the city of Ames is, because the city of Ames is considered an electrical generation unit since they co-fire a small amount. It's a small difference in the EPA rules, but they're still both regulated by EPA and have to meet those guidelines.
So let me ask the question differently. And I'm not trying to be mean to the EPA, but that's meaning less and less to me over time. My question may be better articulated with respect to the emissions of gases to the environment, carbon footprint type issues, CO2 issues. Is there a difference in the mass burning and the RDF approaches that we should be thinking about?
Well, it depends upon actually what goes into, what is in your stream that you're burning.
Okay, that's fair. But assuming both metropolitan, I would think there'd be somewhat comparable towns to towns. And maybe they're interchangeable and I'm pursuing something I shouldn't be, but I want to tease out, we're having people come every time now to remind us to be cognizant of our climate impacts. This is certainly a decision for the council that perhaps could have some environmental impacts. I just need some help thinking through that.
No, that's a very good question, a very fair question. And I don't know if Bill has anything to offer, but otherwise we can do more digging related to the different emission types of emissions that come out of the two facilities, see if there's any comparison there. Burning anything is going to obviously create a certain amount of emissions. Burning wood has a certain amount of emissions, and they're different emissions, obviously, than burning coal or burning natural gas. So there's still emissions to be concerned of, but as far as how they separate out, we can absolutely look into that and provide some more information on what we can find.
If it's readily available.
Sure. It does have everything to do with really what's coming into the waste stream from a standpoint of using refuse-derived fuel. Depending upon what the community produces, what businesses may be in the area and be providing waste into the system. So it's very varied that way, but happy to look up and see if there's any specific information. Yeah.
Thank you.
And for all of these facilities, whether they were mass burn or we did have one refuse-derived fuel system that was co-fired with wood. That particular Xcel Energy was that facility. All of them had noted that they had had challenges related to non-beneficial waste coming into their systems. All of them had made different concessions. They had done different education awareness programs. They had implemented different programs or different operational components in order to address those. Some of the similarities between those facilities included looking at increasing awareness or increasing connection to recycling opportunities, whether they be curbside or whether there be a community drop-off system. It's maybe enhancing or expanding what they might already have in place. Also looking at organics, both residential and businesses, and then also looking at adding additions to the particular processing plant itself in order to ensure that they were having a cleaner stream coming into the system. In looking at our recommendations, and I'm going to turn that over to Bill to talk more about that, but what I would say is the waste diversion enhancement recommendations that both the consultant looked at and that we'll be talking about are really based upon the Environmental Protection Agency's waste management hierarchy and least beneficial to, most beneficial to least beneficial preferred. This hierarchy is also incorporated into the State Code of Iowa and sets the policy for solid waste management. So these recommendations do follow along those lines.
I get to talk about the fun stuff, the recommendations from a consultant. Just to kind of give a little background history, the Arnold Chatelain facility is the longest operating municipal waste energy facility in the United States. Even though the plant started operation 45 years ago, it's gone through a number of major and minor upgrades to keep the plant current with industry changes and new technology. In just the past 12 years, an entire new air knife system was installed to separate the RDF from your non-burnable waste. Along with the air knife, a non-ferrous recovery system was installed to recover aluminum, copper, and brass. The primary high-speed shredder, which was original to the facility 45 years ago, was recently replaced with a low-speed, high-torque shredder. This shredder has allowed us to improve safety for our employees and for the facility, while also reducing the amount of electricity needed to operate the shredder. We're now into our 4th year of using a hybrid loader at Resource Recovery. This loader has allowed us to have the same amount of horsepower with a 25% reduction in diesel usage, reducing our carbon footprint. So some of the other changes or operations that the consultant talked about were looking at the changes to the air knife system. We have, as I said, we installed a new air knife system here recently, but there's always additional material that can be recovered from the system. We have taken 3 existing air knives, modified them within the facility, and we've also added an additional collection point within the facility to increase the amount of material that we're recovering. Along with that, we've also been in contact and working with other waste energy facilities. In the past 6 months, we've had personnel from 2 other RDF facilities visit our plant to take a look at our best practices so that they can take them back to their facilities. In the last 10 months, some of our staff has gone to other plants to review their operations and see what we can take from them and bring back to our facility and improve our facility. And some of those ideas are what we've taken to improve our air knife system and increase our recovery. Anecdotally, we've only had it in operation for a short period of time, but we're seeing very good results. Hopefully those results maintain and we're able to see some long-term results there.
Bill, pardon my ignorance, but an air knife system, can you explain what that does?
Sure, I'm sorry. What an air knife system is the waste stream after it's been processed goes across a conveyor and it goes over the conveyor. And as it's coming over the conveyor, that's what we call a waterfall. And we shoot a stream of air through that waterfall. The idea being that the light material gets pushed further and goes into a conveyor further away. The heavy material, which is normally non-burnable, goes in a closed conveyor. What we've done over time is we've tried to make sure we get really good material for the power plant. we've adjusted the air knife to make sure we can only get the best quality material in that far conveyor. Then sometimes some material that may still be beneficial comes in that close conveyor. And that's where we need these additional air knives to do separations further down in the process.
Thank you.
So that's what we use the air knife for. Another option that the consultant talked about was a disc spreader and optical scanner. What this is it's a machine that's put in the facility. The one they're looking at was 112 inches wide. It has a disc spreader to spread the material out across that 112-inch wide conveyor belt, and then has optical scanners on the end that looks for paper and plastic. And then it uses air to blow those paper and plastic out, once again, to recover additional material that we've taken time to process and look at. This is a fairly large piece of equipment and fairly expensive. The one that they were looking at was a little over $1 million. So we'd have to take a look at how it would fit in the facility and then what kind of payback we could get. The air knives are much cheaper, low-tech type of option. And if we can recover more material with them, we'll just see how this fits in. So this is a high-tech option that we're also looking at. And finally, the last thing that the consultant recommended was a combustion system review, looking at something that would be able to combust more of the waste stream. One example would be, as Mary talked about, a mass burn type facility. Currently, with the facility we have, for instance, wood you would think would be good for them. For them to combust it in their boiler, type of boiler that they have right now, it needs to burn in suspension. So it really has a short period of time for it to burn. If you put a piece of a 2x4 in there, all you're going to do is just char the outside of that piece of wood. And it's going to go to the bottom of the grates and just sit there and not be fully consumed. In a mass burn type facility, it's in there for a long period of time, 30, 45 minutes. It has more of a chance to get fully combusted. So we're going to look at other options for combustion. We'll also look at other technologies too. And as Don talked about in his CIP presentation, and John talked about the Public Works presentation, that's budgeted in our operations budget for this upcoming year. So that's something we'll work with Electric Services and take a look at options for different technologies and how that would be integrated into our system. A big thing that the consultant talked about and that we are really excited about is organics diversion. As Mary talked about looking at the waste hierarchy, the first thing we want to look at is see how we can reduce the amount of material that's generated. The best way we can do that is through public awareness, education, working at generation talk with grocery stores, with other points of sale, how we can get that information out and help educate people on the best way to what you're buying, how much you're buying, how you store it, and making sure that you keep it within a useful date. Second option is making sure that material that you don't need, that you get it donated, that you get it to a right end rather than just throwing it away. One of those options we've got is a really good one here in town right now is Food at First with the free meal program and perishable food pantry. They work with local restaurants, grocery stores, take a lot of material that may be close to sell by date or that the store says is out of their window of sale and running it through the food pantry. So that's working, making sure we get that material and get it into the right place. Lastly, what we're looking at is kind of towards the bottom of the waste hierarchy is composting. We're looking at a number of different options there. One thing we're looking at is a pilot program for organics drop-off here in Ames. We've got a number of different peoples and location we're talking about. Hopefully it's something we can get rolled out and have in place by EcoFair and kind of use that as a kickoff and bring it out and introduce it.
Would that include yard waste?
Yard waste would still be handled through the yard waste site. But one of the options we're looking at is potentially putting organics collection point at the yard waste site.
I see.
You know,
Okay.
kind of tying that.
So you mean food?
This would be, yes, this would be primarily
Gotcha.
food waste.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Gotcha.
Correct. Mhm. There's an ISU graduate student working on a project where they're looking on behaviors and composting. And there are a number of people, some people at the table here are going to be participating in that project and monitoring and recording their food waste. But they are also lining up a curbside pickup program for organics. We'll kind of see how that works out and how that is received. Another one is we've been in discussions with water and pollution control. They've got anaerobic digesters down there. If we do a pilot project where we have people drop off food waste, how would we be able to get that to the WPC? How would we get that into the anaerobic digesters where we could then recover some energy from it down there? Lastly, or I shouldn't say lastly, one thing we're working at is there are several companies doing commercial recovery of food waste. We're looking at businesses, restaurants, how we can get them aware of those options are and increase participation there.
Did you like one of the examples of those, the Green RU service? Do you have any sense that they are ever or soon going to be at a scale where they would offer residential service as a business model of theirs? I mean, is that, yeah.
That's a conversation. I haven't had that conversation with them, but we certainly can. They're actually the company that actually runs our yard waste site. One of their other division runs our yard waste site. So they've graciously taken all of our pumpkins the last 2 years that we've collected at Resource Recovery, taking them down there and you run them through their compost site.
Yeah, it seems like they're growing. So I didn't know, if they would eventually be at a scale where they would think about branching out into residential service.
It may be an option. We can certainly have that conversation and ask them if that is something they'd be looking at in their business model.
Yeah,
cool. Have we had any discussions with people who may be looking for animal food?
We have not directly here, but we have had companies call us and tell us that they have off-spec material. I had a company call and say they had a bunch of lactose, which is a milk product, off-spec, and they were trying to figure out what to do. And they said, can you take 200,000 pounds of it? And it's like, well, no, that doesn't really work with our system. But I was able to give them the name of several feed companies that would take it. So once again, and that's something that, through the survey and talking about it, we're trying to look at it holistically, not just a little bit of what we do at Resource Recovery, but the entire waste stream, what we can do with it, making sure we're diverting as much of that from the landfill, because it's a perfectly good usable product for animal feed, maybe not for human feed, but there's no need of that going to landfill and just getting buried and disposed of. So, but that is something we work with and talk about. Lastly, one other thing we're looking at on the organics program is the Healthy Life Center, with what they're going to be looking at and doing there with kitchen and garden. It'd be an ideal location for us to do some backyard composting and do some demonstrations and help people through that, that kind of uneasiness. How do I do it, or what's it look like? We could do a compost barrel. We could just build one out of pallets and chicken wire. And we could also do worm composting and show people some other different options of it and make it take a little bit of the fright away from it. So one other recommendation that the consultant had was a last use reuse center. As they noted during the waste audit, there's a lot of material that comes in people no longer need but still has some useful life. This is a lot of what we do at Rummage Rampage. There's a lot of material that comes in there people no longer want, but they just want to get rid of it. This would be an opportunity to sort some of that material out. The majority of that material that comes in is not beneficial to us to make fuel for the power plant. So this is an opportunity to take that material, keep it out of landfill, give it to, find some use for it. We haven't kind of worked through, was this something we would sort out, have a separate building, put it in? Is this something we pull and we have the nonprofits come pick up as they need? We just started this month, starting people bringing bicycles and throw them away. Normally we just take the end loader and clam them and crush them and put them in the metal bin. We started to pull some of those out and working with local vendors that can take those and work with Boys and Girls Clubs, YSS, organizations like that where someone may need a bicycle and getting those properly home. So those are the type of things we're working at and looking at and seeing how we can improve the material. Some of the things we're currently doing that we want to kind of take credit for that the consultant was very happy with was our current programs such as our glass recycling. Last year, we were able to keep 170,000 pounds of glass out of the landfill. We worked with a company down in Kansas City to take that and utilize it to make bottles for Boulevard beer and then also glass for Owens Corning insulation. So, insulation out of it. We added 3 additional drop-off sites last year. We've already got 1 new one for this year, and hopefully we'll get a couple more this year and just continue that project. Household hazardous waste is a program that we've been very had a lot of support for. We are a remote satellite location for Metro Waste. They actually run the program. We just run the collection site up here. In December, we got a new facility to house that, and it's actually twice the size of the old facility. It's going to allow us to hold more material on site, and we'll probably increase our hours and dates of service on that to improve the collection rate. We're actually the largest collector of material for regional sites for Metro. Last year, we had over 25,000 pounds of household hazardous waste come through that facility. Rummage Rampage is a project that we started here 3 years ago. Last year, we were able to divert 102,000 pounds of material from landfill and generated over $18,000 for nonprofit agencies. Last April, we started a rebate program for compost barrels. First year, we had 18 people apply and qualify for rebates, and hopefully we can increase that exponentially this year by talking about the program and getting the word out even more. The last thing that the consultant recommended and talked about was our messaging. Trying to make sure we have a consistent, uniform message, trying to tie our message together with Iowa State so we're saying the same thing, using some of the same language. What we're also looking at doing is increasing how we interact with community. For instance, this year at Eco Fair, we're looking at doing some breakout seminars, workshops where we can talk about composting, we can talk about recycling, and just 10, 15-minute seminars so people can come in and visit and talk about those. We do presentations at all the science nights in elementary schools here in Ames. We're a partner sponsor for Stash to Trash. We're a founding sponsor of the Rummage Rampage. We've disposed of all the material from Skunk River Navy over the year during their cleanup projects. We do numerous tours of resource recovery and presentations. We'll go out to groups. Lori, I'm sure most of you met, is a great spokesperson for us. She lives this day and night. She'll go out any time of the day or night and speak to your group anywhere. She loves going to preschools, going to retirement centers, anything in between. She's fantastic and does a great job with that. We also host tours quite often through the Iowa International Center. They bring foreign people, dignitaries through. They're looking at how to handle waste in their countries and their communities. And they look at us as an example and a way to do it responsibly. So to kind of wrap it up, we've got 15 dedicated staff members at Resource Recovery. They're excited about increasing the amount of material that can be saved and diverted from the landfill and look forward to working on these recommendations. It's encouraging to have a lot of people within the community interested about how their waste is handled and how to maximize the recovery of those usable resources. We're always focused on how to handle your waste in a responsible, local, and sustainable solution. So looking forward to implementing some of these suggestions and ideas. Any questions?
I have a few. I'll go. What do we do with batteries? People can bring batteries to the plant.
Batteries
and
can come
where do they go? Can you just remind me?
We've got a number of different outlets. Currently, Interstate Batteries is collecting the batteries from us. We're just kind of a collection site for them. They take them.
Okay.
There's Cal Recycle. There's lead acid batteries can go to just about any recycling. Metal recycling will take those. So there's a number of different outlets for them.
Okay, cool. That was just my own info. So we pull aluminum out of the resource recovery plant. Is that a material that we get money for? Like,
Yes.
is that a positive gain for us?
Yes, it is.
So would there be a disadvantage to putting aluminum bins as there are glass bins? I know we probably don't get a lot of aluminum as people are probably maybe recycling them on their own through like a private waste management or chitty recycling program. They're redeeming them at the stores maybe, but if you get money out of it, I just wondering if there would be a disadvantage to having a collection bin for aluminum, just to keep what little might get into your waste stream out ahead of time. I don't know. That was just a thought.
It's certainly something we could take a look at.
Yeah. Yeah. And just a thought for that, because other towns do it. And again, our system's way different than other towns. Other towns do it for like donation purposes, like the fireworks, you put your cans in here or whatever. Oh, we could do that. Oh, wait. But just another, where we have glass bins, you could have an aluminum bin too. People wouldn't think anything of it. They just put them in there. and we'd get the aluminum money. I don't know, just a thought.
Well, and the idea there is that it's hard to do automatic aluminum separation.
Well, they can do it at the plant, and I don't know that it's necessarily hard, but you'd just be saving that step of it even going into the plant. And just a thought. My other question is on the marketing, the imagery. I have a really big pet peeve with the use of the term recycling to describe the incineration of refuse, and we still do that. So on the website, I double checked just to make sure that I wasn't bringing up something that we'd done away with, but I still see it on here several times where we refer to, we can recycle your garbage into fuel for our power plant. I think that is a misuse of that term. It's a complicated system. I understand the nuances. I'm not being critical, but I think it's a misuse of the term recycling.
Mary has brought that one up to our
Okay.
attention
And
before.
that's something we're trying to
We've
change
discussed.
in our terminology and how we present things.
Okay.
We encourage people to recycle as much as you can and give us what you have left.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where, once again, the consistent messaging and making sure we're using the right terminology.
Right, because I don't mind, if we're using good fuel, and getting a good result, but I don't want to call it recycling if it's really incineration.
And there is the opportunity to distinguish. I mean, the metals are pulled out and are recycled.
Yes.
And so I think
Recycling
there's
occurs as part of the
Yeah.
process.
right.
Yes.
I think that's just part of talking about it. But the
Right.
Diverting material from the landfill is, as you mentioned, it's a great thing to be able to talk about.
Well, and that's
where
part of-
other communities don't.
That's the main benefit, right, of the resource recovery plant. We
Right.
shouldn't sugarcoat that and say that it's the great source of energy. I mean, it does supplement the energy use. It offsets natural gas and things like that, but it's not that easy. Energy could be cheaper on the open market sometimes, and so really the main benefit of this resource recovery plant is landfill diversion.
Exactly.
I like that we're focusing on that as
Right.
the real point.
Right.
I think that's true. It's good to remember.
Yes.
So one of the recommendations was providing space for this additional sorting to occur, especially for bulky items. Do we have the ability to expand in the current location? I mean, are we eyeing electric services, reclaimed coal dump for this sort of thing? Or I don't know where you expand to do that kind of sorting.
That's something we'd have to take a look at. We have a little room on the west side of the facility. We've kind of got some green space there on the west side of the facility by the street. On the east side of the facility, on the other side of the street, we actually own some of that property there. So that might be a potential there. If our brothers and sisters across the road wanted to give us some area, I mean, that would certainly be a possibility too.
The other thing that I found very interesting was the question of mattresses. And I was surprised to see that my hometown, Red Wing, Minnesota, has an actual mattress. I don't want to call it a facility. They've got something that their angle grinder is used to take apart mattresses for RDF and for metal. But I got the impression from reading the rest of the report that mattresses are kind of a losing proposition, and yet it doesn't sound like they're that difficult to deal with, and you end up with things you can use. So can you explain the mattress issue, Bill?
They're bulky. They're not very heavy, so they're hard to transport. They take up a lot of space. The metal that's used in mattress construction is some of the lowest quality metal. So it doesn't have near as much value as tin cans and regular residential metal. The markets just kind of go up and down, and very often they go down lower than what the cost of. It's a very labor intensive cost to deconstruct a mattress because you have to do it by hand. You have to go in with angle grinders and cut all the material off. Then you have to separate it out. So, then they get individual pockets for every spring, and that takes more time to cut each one of those apart. So it's a very labor intensive process. So it's something we watch very closely because that is a large part of the waste stream that we'd love to find a home for. I know there are some facilities in Minnesota where they'll charge anywhere from $15 to $25 per mattress and box spring to dispose of because they have a hard time handling it. And when you go and bury a mattress in a landfill, you run a bulldozer or a compactor over it to compress it down. You pull over and it pops right back up. So they don't like to have them at the landfill either. So It's something we're watching very closely because we'd like to really find some way to handle that.
Well, if I was reading the report correctly, we lose money on mattresses.
Yes, currently
A
we do.
lot. And we would still lose, we trucked them all the way to La Crosse, which seems to be the nearest place.
It is.
But we'd lose less money doing that. Is there any way that mattresses are ever a money-making proposition?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Too bad, because I'll bet we have a lot of them because of the
We do, with the
student
turnover.
population and
So, well, and
lots of people moving in and out a lot.
right. Also, the facilities that are doing mattress recycling are becoming fewer and fewer. So that increases the cost to be able to truck them to a facility. And so that's, come to be an issue as well. But it is an absolutely tough, bulky item.
It seemed like one of the, or not an option, but Iowa State does a lot of food composting, according to the report. And they didn't see that as being practical for us to try and partner with them in terms of food composting. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's considerations related to the facility currently isn't constructed for the additional material nor permitted for the additional material. There's also considerations just related to the uniformity of the material coming in to the system. Once you open up sort of a community waste stream, it gets much more difficult within the permitting. So those are the two major components at this time.
I didn't realize how impactful it was having your wet paper to make sense. You just can't get it separated. And so it's intriguing to see if we can try and accomplish that. So
Maybe we could arrange for the mayor to participate in his own audit of the garbage. He and Councilmember Martin did not have those opportunities that the rest of us had.
yeah, we're just we'd be happy to help out.
Well, there is one facility that every 5 years does, one of the facilities that were audited, every 5 years they do a waste characterization audit. So there'd be many opportunities.
Yeah, just send me an email and I'll give you the
All right.
This is a somewhat connected and disconnected, but I saw a piece on media here recently about the fact that the market for metals and recycling materials in general has gone down quite a bit because of some of our overseas recipients have become very picky on that. And so I've been challenged in my thinking by several people in terms of the cost to transport materials, continue transporting materials all the way to, let's just say, the East Coast, wherever the markets are as well too. And is that really the most sustainable process? Have you thought through that? Is it still better to try and recycle paper? I mean, personally, we have recycling, cart, we recycle metals, paper, that kind of stuff. I know you probably prefer to have that yourself. I'm trying to rectify, trying to be environmentally conscious and do recycling with the fact that if it's just being put in a landfill on the East Coast or taken out to sea and dumped out of the sea, that seems to be a real counterproductive. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm sure you're in the trade journals and your different seminars, you're hearing about that. Can you kind of comment on that for my education at least?
Well, we've certainly had a reduction in markets due to some of the outlets for the recyclable materials. The other consideration, as you alluded to, is the contamination related to what are the clean streams of recyclables. And there's a lot of contamination that's happening, which gets into consistent messaging of exactly what should go where and how. Related to, sort of the viability or the impact of recycling, I think an important sort of consideration is sort of the apples to apples comparison of utilizing recyclable materials into a byproduct that then can give you additional products versus starting all the way from a virgin material standpoint. And I think when you compare them from that standpoint, there is still good sense in considering those recycling options and the recyclable materials. And so that's where, if you're just considering a transportation footprint, most definitely, it's less of a transportation footprint to take something, a few miles to a landfill versus other facilities. But I really think we have to get down into the raw materials and the products that end up. So that's what I would offer.
Yeah, I was trying to think holistically, and the whole systems, like you talked about, what makes the most sense. We have a unique situation here that we actually have, we can convert materials into fuel, which is certainly unique. And just trying to think my own self personally, how do you balance, what do you put in recycle? You know, tell them which does Bill want to have me sending, his way essentially.
Recycle your metal and your glass first and foremost, right? That's what you would say. Metal and glass,
Glass
easy.
specific.
That's easy. Shouldn't go in the waste stream.
And it's amazing some of the metal we get in the waste stream.
Yeah.
Car axle,
Wow.
200-pound blocks of metal.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah. The shredder doesn't eat those. It doesn't like those.
They eat the shredder. Huh. Yeah, the NLC. I went to a National League of Cities seminar on that, and it was interesting. They talked about communities I think had gone away from waste to energy systems for a while in favor of recycling. But now you have this big, a lot of conversations now across the country where they're thinking about waste to energy again, because the recycling markets are so poor and look like they're getting worse. So.
Right.
I
And you
thought that was
combine,
interesting.
sorry, excuse me.
No, you could.
You combine that with just the influx in products coming into the marketplace. There's so many different polymers of plastics and those sorts of things that there really isn't a clean stream of those recyclable materials, which didn't used to be the case. So things have changed so dramatically. And I think another consideration that we certainly want to address in our messaging is going higher up the hierarchy. And so not necessarily looking at decisions when it hits a recycling bin or a garbage, bin, but higher up when we're actually, when folks are actually considering consumption decisions. And we hope that we can actually get more information out about reduction and donation opportunities. Bill also doesn't want textiles into his system. And so how can we really look at hitting that decision-making point at a higher level, at the hierarchy?
Yeah.
I think if you look at our marketing, you're going to see a shift away from sort of that idea of what to do after you've purchased. It's more of the idea of, do you need it in the first place? And when you look at things like food composting, the biggest bang for the buck is don't buy it if you don't need it. If you were an average American and throw away 25% of the food that you purchase, what a tremendous difference that would make if you didn't purchase that in the first place. So if we can shift more towards behavior, and behavior is always the hardest thing to change, but if we can look at it this more holistically, big picture, source reduction and reuse is the top and the main message, and that's a simple message, then maybe we can get some traction on action.
Yeah. No, it's good. I like that too.
I know a lot of communities are doing, or they're looking at it more of a holistic approach rather than just looking strictly at recycling or strictly at waste to energy. They're kind of looking how they work together.
Yeah.
Because the paper plates, the napkins, the paper towels,
Yeah.
there's nothing you can do with them.
Yeah.
But you can use them to,
Yeah.
you recover that energy you use to create them in a waste energy facility.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. I think it's sort of daunting to think about how you educate a public about a very sophisticated system where you want your glass to go here and you want your blah, blah, blah to go here. But I think it is ultimately it is probably what's best is that level of complexity. Yeah.
Well, since the waste to energy facility first came in production, so many things have changed. And so it's a whole different environment. It's a whole different consumptive consideration now and different products. And so I think it's a perfect timing for some remessaging.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, you may be able to capitalize, the Rummage Rampage can capitalize on the trend in Marie Kondo cleaning that's going on
We
now.
just talked about that.
What?
What is so interesting is donation facilities are finding themselves inundated right
Yeah.
now
Overwhelmed.
through that process. Yeah, so it could be an interesting Rummage Rampage year.
And we will be looking. We are starting up planning for the next Eco Fair, which is April 20th. And Tim sent out some great suggestions. The return of the mini seminar came from a list that he provided us. And if the rest of you have suggestions on how to improve Eco Fair, we would certainly be willing to see if we can incorporate those into the next event.
It's a great
Yes, you may-
opportunity to kick off some of that remessaging we're excited about doing.
Is there a central repository of information of all the things that our community or all of our city is doing to really be sustainable? I mean, you always hear, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. Is this all been collated into one? Like, I mean, we get our City Connect, and it shows how much energy we've gotten from, wind and from other sustainable, measures. And I mean, it just seems like we get people that say, well, we want to be doing more and more and more. We are doing a lot, and I just think it'd be great to celebrate. And maybe we already have that. I'm just not aware of where it's located. But
So we try to put everything through the EcoSmart umbrella, which is all the different departmental programs kind of under one umbrella of environmentally friendly services. Smart housing is one you don't think about, but smart housing is when we do rehabilitation using energy saving components. So what we've done is while we centralize them under the EcoSmart umbrella, they're kind of scattered throughout all the departments. And because it's become such an important part of how we do business, they are scattering further and further, and people are doing things that I may be not even aware of. But they did start centralized under EcoSmart, so smart energy, smart water, smart watersheds, smart housing, smart city, and it's sort of grown from there. And we do try to encapsulate that on the web, but it probably isn't as up to date as it should be. So that would be another one we could update and focus on. Mary actually has helped a lot by getting student input on what they want to see on our website regarding sustainability efforts. And we have not visited that in a while. We could bring that back in and look at that some more.
Well, I keep forgetting the fact that when we converted from coal to natural gas, how much was it?
40% reduction in carbon footprint.
I mean, I think it's just something that people don't realize. It was a massive investment. It was a commitment. It has an economic component to it. There's also a big environmental component to it as well, too. And so I just think that if we can be better informed, and understand all that, and when people bring that up to the council, we can share with them, we are doing this. We are working in a positive way, and we're trying to be holistic and not just be, microscopic in one particular area.
Right.
But trying to really be, on a cutting edge, and there's also a significant investment involved with that, and we want to balance all that as well too. So that'd be helpful, I think, at least for me, or at least know where to look for that information.
So when Bill got the hybrid loader, that was several years ago, but that was a discussion. Do we pay more for a hybrid loader because we know the carbon footprint will be reduced? We just got a new Chevy Bolt that replaced the Nissan Leaf. Some of the stuff we do is just become how we do business. I'm not sure that we try to promote that, but I don't know that we've captured it.
Yeah.
And so I think collecting all these tidbits and putting them on the web in one centralized place, it probably is a good chance to revisit that and update that.
I know Sidewise is considering looking or investigating, electric bus or buses. I mean, that's another piece that we're trying to work towards that end. So I think it's just, I'm just proud to serve, with staff, the council, and the city, and knowing that we're trying to push the envelope and do what we can. And it's just to celebrate it and be educated would be great. So, other questions, comments?
One small question, I promise. I asked a question earlier about the mass burning versus the RDF. Is there an agreed upon answer to the question of landfilling versus incineration? Just as a general principle, is that an easy yes or no?
Through an RDF system? Sorry, or just
Just
in
in general.
Well, carbon footprint, or what do you mean?
Right, in terms of carbon
But don't think
footprint.
about carbon footprint, we have volume reduction requirements.
Well, the waste hierarchy, absolutely, and looks at, if you're looking at the least amount of environmental impact, landfilling is at the very bottom. So any
The worst.
incineration, RGF goes above that.
In-
So yes.
In terms of the carbon footprint, landfills are worse in terms of carbon footprint.
The methane
The-
production is higher in a landfill. You're
Right.
only going to capture a percentage of the methane from a landfill, and you don't start capturing till after the cells close. So you have,
And that's provided you have a capture system.
correct.
Yes.
And that's only required at a certain level, certain size of landfill.
Right.
Okay.
And there are other environmental impacts as well,
Leaching.
that lead to
It's complicated.
Recovery.
There's a lot of different components. I
Most
don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I was just curious if there was a clear industry. Yes, incineration is always better than landfill. Okay.
It's right on
From-
Yeah,
Yeah,
according
from EPA consideration and state law from Iowa DNR.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything you're looking for us from tonight, or you're just basically presenting and just saying we're going to move on? Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Moving
Thank
forward with
you.
recommendations.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the report is publicly available on the city's website. So
Perfect. Thank you. All right, council item 27.
There's a request to table this to the end. the
Yes,
second meeting in
correct.
February. I'd move that we tabled this item until the second regular meeting of the city council in February.
Second.
Okay.
This is the fourth time now that we've tabled this one?
Yeah.
You want to
Getting
do
a
a
little
date
silly,
specific?
right? I mean,
Let's don't do a date specific.
Okay, sure.
Because who knows?
I think it's at the
Yeah,
26th.
I'll withdraw my prior motion.
Just
and-
table to an unspecified date.
Yep, I'll move that we table this item till a date unknown.
Second.
Then we don't have to change.
That's a good point. Do it.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Carried. 28. Request from Downtown Fairway, Ames Fairway to lease remote parking spaces during construction of a new store. Is there any questions for Kelly? Any need to go over this, or is there a motion relative to this?
I'd just like to understand this minimal dollar per slot requirement, which I understand has something to do with our contract requirements somehow,
No consideration.
consideration.
Yeah. Yeah, taking me back to law school, the basics of a contract, to have a valid contract or an offer, acceptance, and consideration. So it's typical to put into any kind of an agreement to like minimum amount of $1, just so there's some sort of consideration given in exchange for the contract to make it valid. It's a standard thing in the legal world and contract law.
I guess maybe I'm used to seeing just $1 total as opposed to $1 per space per year or whatever
We
it
could,
was.
we could do $1 total there too.
still, if I understand on alternative one correctly, it's $20 total we're talking about, correct? Okay.
One time, $20 during the duration of construction.
Okay.
I would move alternative one.
Second. All right. Discussion. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, item 29. I declare the hearing on assessment for cost of asbestos testing on and demolition of dangerous buildings located 1107 Grand Avenue open. Is there anyone here that wishes to address council on that?
Mayor, I'd like to request that we continue this public hearing to a future date. I need to check into something on this as I was rereading through the council action form tonight. I need to double check on a couple things. So
There's no urgency timing wise.
no, absolutely not.
Move that we.
Wait, so I opened the hearing, so do I need to close the hearing or
Continue it.
Continue it.
continue it then? So I need a motion to continue the hearing to a date uncertain or a date certain, Diane? Mark?
You can do it to a date, sir. You can do it to the next meeting. That'd be fine. We'll have it straightened out by then.
I move that we continue this item to the next city council meeting.
Second.
You need a roll call on this, Diane, or need a voice vote? All right, those favors say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right. Declare the hearing on Unit 7 boiler repair project open. Is there anyone who wishes to address council? Seeing none, I close the hearing. Entertain a motion on accepting reported bids and delaying award of contract.
So moved.
Second.
All right, discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 31, declare the hearing on 2017-18 Accessibility Enhancement Program Airport Road Sidewalk open. Anyone here wishes to address council? Seeing none, close the hearing, entertain resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding contract to Manassas Incorporated of Ames, Iowa in the amount of $170,287.40.
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Okay, we have disposition of communications to council. We have 3 items. First is a memo from Planning and Housing Department regarding bicycle parking standards.
Let's see. Hold on.
So your,
Oh.
your alternatives are just thank us very much for the information.
Yep.
Or you can't take any action now. You'd have to put it on a future agenda to see what action you want to take.
I guess I'd move we put it on a future agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Item 2, staff report regarding background on an affordable housing strategy known as inclusionary zoning.
So I'm interested in having this on a future agenda, but I'm not really sure whether that has to be an agenda that is part of the comprehensive plan discussion or whether it's something separate.
Let's have Kelly answer. That's a zoning issue, right?
I do not view that as a comprehensive plan issue. That's a pretty detailed ordinance that's really a zoning issue. It's not really a long-term planning issue.
So it's not a policy issue that we'd want to have considered.
It's a tool to address a policy issue.
Okay.
It's in our current land use policy plan to consider inclusionary zoning. So if you had not heard of this before, maybe at the end of the comprehensive plan under housing strategies, this might be itemized as something specific to follow up on. So it's not directly related to a policy issue of the comp plan. It's a tool to implement a housing strategy.
So if I were to want us to discuss this, would it be more appropriate for us to discuss it before we're getting into the comprehensive plan or after we're looking at the policies and we're trying to figure out the tools we need?
So the second part of your question is probably not for at least 9 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could look at this issue at any point in time that you want, and it doesn't direct your decision-making on the comprehensive plan. So I
So
don't
it
think
would
you need
not-
to wait, and I think you could address it at any time frame you want to.
Okay. I would move that we put this on a future agenda to be determined, the date to be determined by staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
So would we prioritize this with the work plan?
That would
So
be
the
my
work-
only
Discuss
concern
it,
too.
not to discuss it. If you ask us to,
So
Just
right
put it
now,
on there, no date.
so in the work plan, you said provide this.
information,
So just to put it on an agenda is
talk
not,
about this, not.
I guess I'm just,
If it's on the agenda, it's to discuss whether we want to pursue this at all.
no, I know.
Right.
I just get really fearful of just putting these wide, open-ended things on an agenda with no real sense of a direction that we're heading. It makes me nervous. I am interested in talking about it. I'm just trying to figure out a way to do it efficiently and
Specifically.
Yes.
focused.
Yes, I tend to agree. I'm interested in talking more about it too. I seconded this so we could talk about it, but I would like to see a little more focused idea of what we would be talking about. Right. Too.
Is there a way to do that, Kelly? To be more focused versus being as broad?
Well, we could think about it and come back. That's what we could do.
No, this is introducing to the concept and it's what it means, how other cities addressed and used it. So that's the broad concept introduction is what we're doing. If at the
That's what the
time,
memo does for us.
that's right. So do you,
Right,
but it doesn't allow you
so-
to ask questions or of the staff or talk. That's the only thing. Do you want to discuss it in more detail? Have staff answers questions, you put on the agenda. If you decide to move ahead and actually implement it, then there's a whole plan that will have
Of
to
course,
prioritize.
yeah.
So if we decide to add it to an agenda, but we have more questions that we'd like to be asked, do we wait until it's added to the agenda?
Yeah.
And adding it to the agenda allows us to take public input on it as well, right? If people are interested in it, we might know what the community is sensing on it.
I think in response to Chris's question, if there's other things you want to know, you could do another referral about providing a data point, if that's what you're asking, I know what you're asking about, at the time that you bring this back, or
Yeah,
just
the
as a
question
separate
about
item.
This report, we left out something you want to get more information from.
I think now that we have this information, there's more information that I'd like to get.
Oh, well, that's different.
Before putting on the agenda?
Yeah, I guess
better
that's
tell us
kind of
that.
maybe where I'm at too, is that I'm
And-
not comfortable just having a wide open-ended and just,
See, that to me seems like it's going to use staff time, whereas putting it on the agenda for a general discussion of whether we're even interested in it doesn't. But you don't know whether you're interested until you get the additional
Well,
data.
And it's a little bit awkward without being able to discuss it, but it may not include the word zoning. It may be inclusionary, pick a different word. So it's broader than just zoning.
Mhm.
And I'd like to have that conversation at the same time.
So is council interested in potentially delaying taking action on this so that we can introduce a motion that would be more specific and focused so that we don't go into this?
yeah, I want to wait. I need to think about it some more.
Yeah.
I don't have an appetite to add more to the staff. We've got, guys, we've got a lot on the staff
Cool.
plate right now.
This,
Comprehensive plan is one
But
of
the
them.
motion stands, we just vote on it.
That's right. No, I'm
right,
just
but
saying that's
the
the option.
motion doesn't involve more staff time. The motion just involves putting this on a future agenda.
Yep. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and the expectation would be
No work.
not at least for a couple of months, right?
I'd leave that up to you to
We usually
decide
don't.
what works. I don't think there's a rush on this, but
Okay.
I would like to see it in a forum where we can
Okay.
discuss it.
All right.
Before we vote on this, I'd
Yes.
just like to ask, what would your alternative motion be, Chris?
Well, and then again, I'd probably like to have a little bit of time to kind of flesh this out in my mind, but there are other tools that are considered inclusionary that don't have to do with zoning. It may have to do with incentives,
Yeah.
inclusionary incentives.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking too, is I want to think about it a little more. I would like to talk to like Story County Housing Trust Fund about it and flush out some of the ideas. And then, I mean, like I said, I want to have the discussion and I would be willing to make a motion down the road. I'm just not ready to do that yet because I don't even know in my own head what I want to discuss exactly. And I don't want to have a round and round conversation that's not focused.
I'll just say that my interest is that we actually take it up at some point, and I appreciate that you want to take some more time to figure out how to approach it. How do we arrange to make sure that it really does come back and we don't just
That's-
forget about it? For 2 years?
That's why my motion is being made now.
Yeah, I
because we-
understand. Yeah, but I'm asking
got that.
them, do you have a mechanism that would do that?
Well, and I would ask the flip side of that question, how do we, if we pass this, make sure that it comes back in a way that includes something different than zoning?
I could amend my motion to say that I would like to see us place this staff report and other issues related to inclusionary.
It's worse.
That's another task.
No.
I don't know what that
No,
is.
but it would allow the discussion. And then if at some other point Chris wanted to make a different motion, or Amber wanted to make a different motion that could be more specific, I'm just doing this as a placeholder because I want this on an agenda at some point. And I personally would love to hear about inclusionary incentives or anything else. I'd also like to hear about what's being done in Iowa City or whether they feel there's been any success there. But that's a separate issue to putting this on an agenda at some point to be determined by staff.
Okay, so another option would be tabling this to, let's just say, February 26th. It comes back.
Don't do that. It's going to be a big one. Just-
Well, what I meant is
Just
just
mean tabling it on this.
tabling on this, and it just comes back again under
Parking lot, right.
disposition of communications to council.
Yeah.
Come-
So that it gives everybody time to think about it. And then we can be more specific versus just basically having it
That's
go all over the place. So that way, it is coming back on a date certain. It's not going to be forgotten. But we're not just trying to hurry up and just get this thing done and just throw something at it, because I'm hearing people are interested in talking about it. It's just we just don't want to.
I guess I'm confused because my motion doesn't say we've got to bring this back anytime soon. And it gives us months to ask questions if we want or make other motions.
Okay.
So I don't have anything against tabling it. I just wonder what the logic is to keeping it on the list as opposed to saying we're.
I think for me, I don't necessarily want the whole staff report on an agenda. I mean, maybe not. Like I said, I want more time to think about it because I may just want to refer one piece of it for discussion on an actual agenda, not every possible thing that has to do with inclusionary zoning.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
And
So
then it
I
also
will
could-
withdraw my motion.
And it also could be that Chris may have one thing he wants to add to it that's specific in nature relative to that. And we're very targeted. Staff knows where we're going, and we're also very focused when we're talking about it as a council.
Mm-hmm.
Motion's withdrawn. So is there a motion to just table it to
No.
Take no action.
take no
We
action?
don't need to do anything. Just leave it on this.
I don't know how you table something, it's not an agenda.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
not.
all right.
Are you really just saying, when we come back with the list of referrals again, you want to see
Yeah.
that on there again?
On the 26th. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, on
We have the right to
Yes.
bring up anything we want.
It's already
to
been
comment,
disclosed.
so it's not like we need our own permission to bring it up.
Right.
very good.
You know.
All right. Motion withdrawn.
Tashik will make sure it's on the list again.
You got it?
Thank you, Tisha.
Thanks
All
for
right.
watching our back.
Thank you, Gloria. Okay. Item 3, staff report on Steve Bergeson's request for a pre-annexation agreement.
You know, it's for, on the agenda. We'll make a recommendation, right?
Correct. I mean, if you're interested in the proposal, put it on agenda, discuss, so you can give direction.
Move to add this to a future agenda.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, council comments. Chris, we'll start with you tonight.
Oh, I'll make it fast. I have nothing.
The Martin Luther King Jr. celebration at the middle school was great last night. That was really fun. Especially congrats to the Ames High step team. I hadn't seen them perform before, and that was like the most lively, fun part of that show. It was really great. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Amber?
Nothing.
Hey.
Hello. So Cody Woodruff and I, Speaker of the Senate, have been talking about some possible dates for a spring joint meeting. And so he shot me 2 dates to just kind of put out to all of you. February 27th or March 20th. Those are both days.
March 20th?
Or is that another one?
That's during spring break.
That's spring break.
Is that during spring?
Let's do that one.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Can we do it someplace warm and fun?
I know that's spring break because I'm gone.
Yeah, I honestly probably would too. Let me get an email. Well, the February one is not over
Yeah, we'll
spring
be
break.
too.
We have a lot of meetings in February.
Yeah, well, he said
Can
February,
you send
March.
us an email? We can.
Why don't you send it to Diane?
Okay, yeah, I
And then
just
she can
wanted to-
kind of get that all coordinated.
Sure thing. I just want to put that on your minds before that. But other than that, I don't really have anything else.
Gloria?
I went to the State of the Community presentation at the School District Administration Building last week. It was very interesting to hear all the exciting things that are going on around the area. But I had an interesting conversation afterward with Provost Wickert regarding something that he said during the presentation, which was that he's very excited about the Campus and Community Commission and having Pete Englund involved with that. And it turns out that one of the things that they're doing on campus is actually having work groups that are identifying things that are issues, like childcare in Ames and those kinds of things. And he suggested that perhaps we might be wise in talking to some of those work groups or having Pete, who is working with the work groups, talk to them. So I just wanted that out there as an idea for a means of getting some more input from campus because they apparently are already thinking through issues. We need to channel them into the system. So I hope we'll be able to follow up on that. That is my only comment.
David?
I have just one topic, and this is about a conversation that previous council had in, I think it was late 2016 or 2017, had to do with net metering. And my recollection is at the time that the council made some decisions about what to do there, but also asked that the topic come back to reevaluate after a period of time. So I'd like to ask that we just get a status update on that and what the plan is to revisit that topic. So I guess put that in motion form. I'd move to ask for a memo on that topic.
I'll second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anything else?
Nothing else from me. Thank you.
Tim?
In the discussion of the presentation of the CIP, topic of cybersecurity came up, visit with Steve, and staff is interested in doing an audit. And so I would move that we start the process of getting prices for a consultant that would conduct such a cybersecurity audit of our information systems.
There a second?
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Nothing else, thanks.
Okay. Just by way of reminder, you're probably all aware of it. We're going to be getting into a lot of busy meetings, but we have a week from Thursday night. We have a Healthy Life Center update meeting, 7 to 9. So that'll be a good time to find out where things are at with respect to that. And then we get into city budget overview.
John, could you
The next
confirm the date, time, and place for that?
Yep, it's Thursday, January 31st, 7 p.m. And I believe it's at the Oakwood Road.
Yeah, City Church of
City
Ames.
Church Ames, yep.
2400 Oakwood Road.
Quizzing you.
You knew.
Just want to make sure. Got
So, anyway. And just for information, I've been asked to attend and be on a panel discussion for the Nevada Economic Development Commission this Thursday night. And the goal is just to continue discussing how we're working together with different communities in our county. So I think they so appreciate the council's support on the taking the waste water from Burke. That was instrumental, and that was a huge partnership, reach. And I think they want us to kind of just talk about that and just know that they're really. I think that we have a great friendship with the mayor as well as with the council and the city. So I'm pleased with that. So I have nothing else. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
to adjourn.
All right, we're adjourned.